Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see second part, what if Deku joined the alliance of villains. Here is short summary. Left with no other option, Izuku turns to the side of evil to continue to change the world for the better. But how will the world change as the most heroic hero becomes a villain? Villain Deku. But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. Hidden from the eyes of society was a world behind closed doors, obscured by the heroes of society and their shining light. But unlike popular belief, it was not filled to the brim with crime and evil. Rather, it was accumulation of lost souls, each one having fallen out of favor with the world. And in this darkness one victim laid still, a young man now ruined by his past. He laid in a stuffy old couch within a damp, abandoned building housing other homeless people. He was lucky to have found a place like this, not needing to spend his small amount of money on a cheap inn or sleep inside a quiet alleyway. Yet as the mysterious man with copious burn marks rose from his sleep, he struggled to get up from his couch. Not because he was sick or tired, but rather he didn't have the motivation to get up and start his monotonous day. It was so common for him to wake up and wander the city he roamed, aimless and with the sole objective of scavenging throughout the town to get by. Instead he stared at the ceiling for a little while, waiting for boredom or hunger to motivate him enough to leave, usually the latter. His mind was nearly void of thought save for one, a question that he asked himself all too often. What am I gonna do? It's been years since he's abandoned his old life and identity, yet he still had no idea what to do with himself. He no longer had the luxury of a stable life, nor was he under the protection of the heroes, so he was truly on his own. He couldn't even show his face without drawing some sort of attention to himself, and with no place to call home he's left to wander the streets. And all because of him, he thought, thinking back to one man, the very reason why he was here. It sickened him to think of that man, and what he's done, all of the dreams he's created only for them to be stamped out in one fell swoop. The young man tightly gripped his fist in anger as he got up from his resting place. He was helpless to the past, defined by the pain he's gone through. And because of it, Dabi was nothing more than a scarred freak who roamed the streets, shifting from place to place and doing his best to survive. Yet there was nothing else to do, no way to combat the system that destroyed him, no way to get back at the man that did this to him. He was helpless to the world, and it pained him to think that his life was practically over. Yet in thinking of the life he had before, he'd rather die on the street than go through that hell again. Instead he rose from the couch and put on his black hoodie that he wore on most days and noticed the fading color of his hair, the gradient of black slowly rubbing off again. I'll have to get this done again, damn this shit's tedious, he thought. Though it was hard to maintain his current appearance, he knew that it was better that he continue doing so, lest someone find him out through hair color alone. In finally standing from his couch, his anger subsided and in its place was an intense hunger, the result of skipping dinner in favor of sleep. Making sure to hide his possessions, he set off to wander the city of Kamina Ward. Hopefully he'd get to find a fast food joint before his stomach would start to hurt. His usual feeling of emptiness was only amplified by his hunger, both feelings mixing together to form a sort of depression that he was well used to. Someday, things will turn up for him. As if, he doubted, no one was there for him, watching his back or even looming over him like before. He's still on his own as he's been for years. Walking out of the dark and decrepit building, he slowly made his way through the equally rough, run-down block. Overshadowing the single cluster of dusty old buildings were brighter, taller, more modern-looking ones surrounded by average-looking people. As he made his way through the morning crowd, each and every pedestrian ignored him in favor of getting through their days. 2 cities away was the city of Musudafu, bustling with morning activity as kids and teens ran to their schools while the adults walked to their jobs. Also within the city was another, similar outcast, hidden in plain sight as everyone went about their days. Himeko Toga, a blonde girl who seemed to always be wearing her favorite schoolgirl outfit, strolled the harmless streets of the city. Yet she secretly stalked the crowds with a wolfish demeanor, ready to pounce on any unsuspecting pedestrian that may get too careless and stray from the crowd. Unlike most who are thrown away from society, she was able to adapt to the city, so much so that she learned to hide in plain sight. A single glance of a harmless high school girl would put anyone off, but her experience in the streets lets her almost disappear from people's sights, untraceable. Her ability to remain inconspicuous was unmatched by any, or at least anyone she's met. Case in point, earlier when she silently cornered an unknowing man in an alleyway. Her victim was left unconscious and missing a whole pint of blood after she was through. Although she made sure that the man was still breathing when she abandoned him, lest she want to attract more attention from the police. However, Toga found herself craving more blood again. Her appetite was difficult to gauge lots of the time, but for months she always remained just a little bit hungry for more. The sense of a desperate wanting made her ever more anxious, pulling risker stunts in favor of having more blood to drink. But it was never enough. Man, I could still go for some more, she thought out loud, though as she looked around there was no lonely individual or distracted pedestrian that stuck out to her keen eye. She was truly lost as to who to drink next. Frustrated, she was forced to dig into her pockets and pull out another vial of spare blood. For months the blood Toga collected tasted off in a way. The simple, metallic liquid no longer had the same effect for her as it's had for years. Instead she craved the sweet, tangy taste of a special blood, a blood that tasted akin to dark chocolate for her as it would a normal person. And that blood. She still remembered it well. Izuku. His blood was so tasty. There was just something about his blood that made it different, so special that it made everything else taste a little bland. Unlike the plain, forgettable pedestrian that she'd always managed to knock unconscious, his blood was just a little bit special, but all the more different that everything else changed. She didn't know why his blood was so sweet. Perhaps it was his blood type. Maybe it ran deeper than that. His cute face, his sweet, bubbling personality. They were just so slightly different, yet it made Toga see the average victim of hers seem so bland. The second I find him, I'll make sure to. Excuse me, sorry. Derailing her train of thought, Himeko snapped her head backwards as she heard a familiar voice. Blocked by the crowd around her was just the green-haired boy she was looking for, piercing through the veil of people and running at near full speed. It was shocking Toga how convenient this was for her, as though the universe willed it so. But without a second thought she took chase, prancing just after him as he failed to take notice. Her hunter's instincts allowed her to remain hidden to Izuku, tracking him as he pushed on. Chee-hee, if I can find out where he's going, then maybe I can ask him for more blood. If not, then maybe I'll have to take it. Spearheading through a wall of people, Midoriya ran through the busy street late to school. It was an accident that he forgot to set his alarm, but after he returned from training and passed out there wasn't much else he could do. I can make it if I run fast enough, he thought to himself, sprinting through the streets and avoiding people as he passed them by. It didn't take long for him to leave the busier streets and enter the less crowded area, reaching the entrance of his school. Greeting the half-tired teen was the humble school building, a white structure 3 stories in height and no different from any other Japanese school. At the school's front entrance were a few students, none in any rush to get to class. Oh, guess I'm not that late, he thought, looking at his phone to see that there were still minutes until the bell would ring. It was almost a shock to him, but upon realizing that he ran at nearly full speed he was more proud of himself than anything. I guess I am growing. Now with no sense of being rushed he strolled into the building. The passing students, the occasional teacher as well as the generic building made for an incredibly ordinary school. Sure, everyone was a bit taller, but to Izuku it all seemed like he was going to middle school again. It was almost like nothing had changed for him, like he was repeating the life that he had before only with minor changes. It was scary in a sense. Seeing the same old faces and the usual odd glance filled Midoriya with an eerie familiarity. He knew deep down that things weren't the same, but in looks everything remained unchanged, perfectly preserved. Kachan is gone, but other than that my school life is still the same. He thought rather depressingly. It wasn't the fact that his ex-friend was gone that made him upset, but where he went and what he was doing did. For years Katsuki and his former friends bullied him out of his dream of being a hero, and while he was just where they wanted him to be, the worst of the bunch got to take his spot as one of the best. It wasn't an unexpected turn of events either, but no less upsetting. Yet I can't blame them. I really can't be a hero, came the even more heart-wrenching thought, and as he entered his partially full classroom he took his seat near the back. To think that a boy so hopeful as himself would be ripped from his one and only dream, his motivation for living. Izuku just couldn't imagine a fate worse than that, being without a goal. Only thinking about waking up with no reason to start the day seemed so petrifying to the young boy. Yet he had to wonder, were there really people like that? People who lost their hopes and aspirations in life, left aimless and defeated? I kinda doubt it, he thought. Save for the one stranger that he met months ago, he hasn't seen anyone even remotely like him. Of all unchanging faces, none of them looked like they were in pain, lost or defeated. Midoriya had spent months training physically and mentally to better achieve his goal, to help others like himself who may need it. Yet none of the people he saw were even remotely like him, passively oppressed by the world. It truly raised the question as to whether there were people like him who weren't blessed with a second chance, and the more he thought the less hopeful he became. While wallowing in his sudden wave of self-doubt, a splash of water came his way, hitting him and drenching his clothes. Sorry, Midoriya, the culprit apologized, though it wasn't a real apology in the slightest. Instead, a small group of people gave a light chuckle before easily moving on. Yet rather than gather the courage to stand up for himself, he instinctively bit his tongue and moved on. He was well used to going through his day with one or two accidents, and today was no different. So rather than bring attention to himself, he instead continued to hide from everyone's eyes, silently drying his wet shirt. From a distance, standing over a two-story building, was Kurogiri, the man made of shadow. As per usual, he arrived to check up on Izuku, like he was ordered to do. Day in day out he witnessed the same sight occur, watching as the young boy was played pranks on or made fun of, yet he couldn't understand why he would let it happen. Perhaps he doesn't believe in his own strength, he guessed, yet it still confused him. For a boy like Izuku, his world was fundamentally changed, gaining a quirk and joining the side of evil. To anyone else this would have made them into a different person entirely, yet to Izuku it's like nothing happened at all. He avoids drawing attention to himself and doesn't bother standing up for himself either, remaining as the target for practical jokes. I can only hope that changes soon, for his own sake. Yet there was also another thing that he spotted, a young girl standing just in front of the school staring in Izuku's general direction. It was frankly amazing that he even noticed her, given that she looked like any other student. But the fact that she stood still for so long was a bit worrying, especially as she stared at the school while just outside of its gates. Perhaps I should return once the boy leaves, it's better to be safe than sorry, he observed as he disappeared from the area. Hours later the bells rang for the final time, allowing the students of countless schools to leave. Waves of children in many places around the city swarmed out as they were either picked up by cars or, more commonly, walked home. It wasn't until much later that Izuku left school. Only after the flood of people were gone was he truly alone, everyone either having left already or staying in school for a number of reasons. The near-empty halls followed by the emptier courtyard gave off a strange feeling of loneliness that he was well used to by now. Instead of paying attention to it, he wrote away at his journal, noting down a quirk that he found interesting. The ability to stick to walls. It's certainly with its advantages, and maybe with the proper training that person could become much greater than they realize. Can they stick to people too? What about if they could use that to throw objects more easily? It'd certainly help with gripping things, he mumbled to himself, oblivious to his surroundings. As he walked out the gates of his school and down the street, he eventually felt an odd presence inside of him, an instinctive worry that caused him to abruptly stop in his tracks and look around. Is someone following me? He asked as he looked behind him, not seeing anyone that stuck out. In an odd way, it was like the feeling of being followed was amplified 10 times over, able to knock him out of his usual distracted days and into a sense of high alert. This was far from normal, and in the end he had to thank his new quirk for it. From the little he knew, it was a physical type, but the more he learned, the more he realized the mental changes that it brought as well. Now more focused than before, he closed the small journal and pocketed it, worried for his own safety. Unlike when Kurogiri followed him, this felt like a malicious presence, a gut feeling telling him to run and hide, but to keep up appearances he only walked at a brisk pace. For many minutes he walked, weaving through crowds and dodging people in the street as they passed, until eventually this small chase of his grew so stressing that it freaked him out. I have to confront them, whoever they are. Maybe they just want to talk. At worst they could be hunting me. While passing through a particularly less crowded block, he halted and turned around to look behind him, seeing absolutely no one other than pedestrians who went about their days. For a moment his body told him that there was nothing, as though the presence had vanished. However, his quirk spoke differently, telling him that there was someone hiding right in front of him. "Whoever's following me, show yourself, I know you're there," he yelled out, confusing a few people as they walked by. For many tense seconds there was no indication that anyone had truly heard what he said, until finally a figure walked away from the street corner. A familiar blonde girl who wore the very same school outfit. "Hi Izuku. Long time no see," she said in an almost flirtatious manner. "Huh, you're Himeko Toga, aren't you? Yep, so glad you remembered my name. But I'm surprised that you knew I was tailing you. I happen to be very good at hiding," she stated rather disappointingly. "So it was my quirk," Midoriya guessed. "Without it I never would have noticed her, not even remotely." "How did you find me? And why are you following me?" he asked her, watching as she skipped towards him. "I was walking around the city when I noticed you pass by. So I followed you and found the school you go to. Isn't that awesome? Now I know where my favorite friend goes to school," she exclaimed, grabbing his hands and cupping them within hers. Favorite friend, he thought, only to feel a sense of dread overtake him by realizing that she knew where he went to school. If anything, a person like her being here only spelled disaster for him. Just then a portal appeared behind him, a black mist that grew until it was revealed to be Kurogiri yet again. "Is everything okay, Midoriya? Is the girl giving you trouble?" he asked, surprising the both of them. "Kurogiri, you're here too. Who's that guy?" "I happen to be the young boy's guardian," he replied. "When I spotted you suspiciously looking at Midoriya this morning, I had to make sure he wouldn't be followed again." With little hesitation he extended a hand, and quickly a mist began forming around Toga's lower half, only stopping below her neck. "If I may, I'll dispose of the threat for you." "Wait, no," Izuku shouted, surprising him. No, don't kill her," the teen asked of him. Thinking it over, the man let go of Toga, freeing her from the strange shadow prison and allowing her to move. "Forgive me for acting out, I assumed you wanted her dead." "It's okay, but please don't do that again," Izuku stated before turning to Toga. "What are you here for? You're not here to kill me, are you?" "What? No, I just came to collect more blood," she stated, surprising the other two. "When I drank your blood it tasted so good. I couldn't stop thinking about you for months, you know. I missed you so much, and now that I've found you I want to cut you up again and have you for myself," she exclaimed, holding her cheeks as she wiggled around in an erotic joy that more or less shocked the other two. "Are you certain that I shouldn't kill her now?" the Shadow Man offered, only for Izuku to decline again. "Please don't," he replied, but it wasn't to say he wasn't concerned at all. Quite the opposite, he felt horrified that a girl he met only once was already threatening him so violently. "I'd would rather not, thank you," he said, making Toga frown angrily. "What? No fair. Your blood is just so tasty. I want more," she exclaimed, almost tearing up by her tantrum. But when she looked up she saw the looming figure of the man made of shadow, keeping her in her place. This is clearly not a good situation. "Let's go, Midoriya, your mother is likely waiting." With a large portal forming behind Kurogiri and Izuku, the two turned to leave, but as they did Izuku spared a second glance at Toga. He saw her heartbroken face with a tear rolling down her cheek. He knew she was crazy and was likely a problem that would keep reoccurring unless he did something about it. Yet he didn't want to kill someone for just bothering him, nor did he want that threat living in the back of his mind as he went about his day. But there was something else that caught his attention. Past the heartbroken face was an inner sadness in her eyes that felt both alien and familiar. It wasn't the fact that she was a girl or that she was crying that made him stop in his tracks, but it was the emptiness in her eyes that was so familiar it felt like he was looking in a mirror. He saw the expression of a person whose dreams were crushed before them, and while they may have been strange or utterly crazy to him, they were dreams nonetheless. She said she enjoyed blood, didn't she? He stopped to think and try to fabricate a reason for his hesitation. Plus her quirk was blood-related too. And she said she liked my blood too, so maybe. Is something the matter, young Midoriya? Kurogiri watched as the boy was frozen in place, struggling to move as he fought with himself. Yet the boy only slapped his own face, struggling to find a solid reason for his next action. But yet again his heart overtook his mind as the logic couldn't explain his need to help that girl. For whatever reason he knew that he could help her. In some way, he was capable of helping her out of her current plight. And maybe, just maybe, there was a good enough reason that he was stopping himself from leaving the situation. But it was like instead of avoiding a threat, he was denying someone their help. She's sick, isn't she? He guessed, judging his assumption purely based on the way she behaved, how she craved blood for no particular reason. He knew that she had a blood-related quirk, yet there was nothing that said she had to drink blood. So maybe it was affecting her mind. Her quirk had such control over her that it motivated her to act the way she did. Or maybe she was just crazy. It was a mistake to give her his blood the first time he met her, but to give her his blood again without the proper reasoning to support his decision was crazy too. What could he do to help her? A problem like the one he was imagining purely for the sake of justifying his gut instinct could run so much deeper than he realized. What good would it be to just enable her? I have to do something, anything. Before he could stop himself, he stomped towards the girl and extended his right arm, opening his palm as if to hold his hand out for her. Here, take my blood, he said, shocking the two around him. This is a mistake, young Midoriya, Kurogiri advised, but was swiftly ignored. But it's mine to make. He shot back, a strange stubbornness overtaking him as Toga looked at him in disbelief. Really? You mean it? ... Yes, I do. In fact, tomorrow after school, if you meet me again, I'll be willing to give you a bit more. He offered, the words falling out of his mouth almost unintentionally, like his heart took over yet again. With a giddy smile, Toga reached for the hidden box cutter knife and used it to slice another gash into his hand, making him wince as blood poured out of him. Again a vial was filled with blood, and afterwards Toga applied some bandages onto his hand with a greater care than before, making sure that they fit nicely on his hand. It hurts less than before, he noted, though it was primarily because he felt the injury already and knew what to expect. His hand also didn't shake with the minor pain, and not that much blood bled through the bandages. Thanks a lot, Izuku, Toga thanked, wiping a tear from her eye as she smiled. I can't wait for tomorrow. With that, the excited girl ran away, turning the corner and otherwise disappearing from sight. Inwardly, a pressure from inside Izuku disappeared as he breathed a sigh of relief, feeling his hand. That was quite the commitment you made, Kurogiri commented, judging silently. No matter how much time he spent with the boy, some of his actions continued to elude him. Yeah, I'm surprised I went through with it, he chuckled, confusing the man. If you doubt your own actions, then what compelled you to make them? I don't know, but it was like she was secretly begging me for help, he responded, further confusing the shadow man. At what point did he consider her threat a cry for help? When I turned to leave, I saw the look in her eyes. It was the same one I had when I stopped trying to be a hero, like I crushed a dream of hers. I don't understand her at all, but I know deep inside my heart that I'm capable of helping her out. He tried to explain, but even his own words sounded a bit strange when coming out of him. In a way, it's what I became villain for, isn't it? Such a strange answer. But you're already quite a strange boy, Kurogiri stated honestly, making Izuku feel a little bad. But your actions are your own, and so are your reasons. If you set out on an objective, then you of all people will see it through. I believe in that much. Thanks for supporting me. It's no problem, young Midoriya. Now, should I teleport you home? You'll be late for lunch otherwise. With a short nod, the two disappeared from sight, a strange feeling of responsibility and concern clouding and confusing Izuku's mind. Even though it was his goal to help others, it still confused him as to how he'd go through with it. Nearby, the young girl wearing a school outfit skipped happily nearby. She was content that someone took such a chance with her, and unlike everyone else she finally had someone for her to call a true friend. Toga continued to giggle to herself, feeling a warmth in her heart and the small pounding of her chest. Someone finally accepted her. Plus he's pretty cute too. She pulled out her vial of blood and drank its contents, soon finding herself satisfied. The longing taste of the blood she craved was now at her fingertips, and with more on the way. Further into the day Izuku found himself roaming the streets of Kamino Ward, both resting and exploring after his training. Though Kurogiri made an effort to teach him more about close combat, the boy knows that there's only so much he could learn from a man who personally does very little of it. For the moment he took the chance to explore more of the world, to take a deeper look at his environment. Yet as the sky darkened and people began retreating to their homes, Izuku found the dense city streets to be less and less crowded. I didn't find many interesting quirks either. He realized as well, opening his notebook and finding no new entries. What bothered him wasn't the fact that he wasn't able to write down any new quirk entries, but that he couldn't distract himself from his current predicament. How he threw himself into yet another plight without thinking properly. For months now he's been reassuring himself that it was all worth it, that he needed to become a villain. Every day he tried to convince himself that what he was doing wasn't a mistake. But upon encountering Toga, his main challenge was warped into a different, more damning problem. He thought up of a million different solutions, paths and possibilities to the psychological problem, yet it all ended either poorly or with disastrous effects. Should he call someone, a doctor or psychiatrist, to help her? No, because what if she just runs away? Should he do personal research on her dilemma? No, because that would be too much intrusion, like he was stepping into a territory that he wasn't able to handle. And all of which were only if the problem was real, which was the most frustrating part of it all. I have to help her, but how? He asked himself yet again, racking his brain for some sort of lesson or piece of advice that told him what to do. Yet neither the likes of All Might nor Sensei have taught him how to handle such an intense social problem. He didn't even know if people ran into this sort of problem. I'm out of my depth. He admitted defeat. Throughout his entire life it was a dream of his to save people. Heroes like All Might were able to save countless lives by just existing, and they brought a sort of hope to the world that no one could deny. Yet he never realized how hard it was to truly save someone until it finally came to saving his first life. And yet he felt incredibly guilty for giving up so early that he felt ashamed of himself, like he didn't deserve any of the effort that those around him had poured into him. Such an incredible responsibility was thrusted into his hands with no ability to handle it, truly a hopeless situation. They make it look so easy. Just beat the villains and save the day, he thought as a man approached him from behind. Hey, haven't seen you in a while. Taking Izuku off guard was a familiar raspy voice, and when he turned around he encountered that mysterious burned man from months ago. He looked about the same as before, covered head to toe in black and masking his true identity. It's you. What are you doing in Kamino Ward? Izuku asked. I'm a wanderer, I tend to get around. He replied casually. Better yet, what are you doing out here? Don't you have a bedtime? Without realizing it, Izuku found himself lost in thought, so much so that he lost his sense of time again. When he looked to the sky and at his surroundings he saw a waning orange hue as well as the dim street lights around him. As it was getting dark there were also very little people walking around, signaling the transition to nighttime. Crap, I lost track of time again. He lectured himself. I'm just clearing my head, that's all. Well, I'm not the type of person to pry. The man shrugged, not thinking much else of the boy's lie. There was an awkward silence that followed, Izuku having a million different things in his head that he lacked the proper ability to hold a conversation. On the other hand, curiosity was the sole motivator for the stranger's interaction, a sort of interest in the boy just like before. Actually, I was thinking about what you said a few months ago, about the heroes. Izuku lied in order to hold a conversation. Really? Looks like my words did stick after all. Yeah, more specifically I was thinking about people like that man that got arrested. People who aren't protected by heroes. That's quite an intense thought, especially for a kid his age. The man wondered, keen on hearing what the kid had to say. To be honest, I've been learning a lot about people like me, outcasts who don't have many friends or people who support them. And I've been trying to help others like me in whatever way I can. Midoriya tried to simplify whilst revealing as little as he could. It was quite the personal plight that he was revealing, but he had to ask someone. So why not ask someone who sort of understood where he was coming from? And how's that working out for you? It's really hard. Harder than I imagined, that is. He admitted, feeling that same pang of guilt return tenfold. There's this girl who I want to help, but I don't know how to do it. No matter what solution I think of, I can only imagine it failing. I don't know what to do anymore, or even if I can help at all. Again there was an awkward silence, this time because of the massive dilemma that Izuku found himself in. For the moment he was less worried about revealing too much than he was finding a solution. He didn't expect any sort of answer either. But some input would be very helpful right about now. That's quite a problem. Makes me wonder why you're asking me. The man chuckled a little nervously, making the boy nervous as well. Well, I had to tell someone. And since you sort of know what I'm talking about, I guess I wanted to hear your opinion. The man only gazed off in the distance, thinking back to his own problems that he's kept hidden from sight. In a way he was the right person to ask for a subject like this, but to think that a boy like him was so willing to throw himself out there was both surprising and heartwarming. If only he existed when I was little. He chuckled to himself, seeing before him a boy so pure yet so challenged by a problem that shouldn't even concern him. He wanted to break the mold like he hinted at months ago with that throwaway line, and now here he was, asking him how to help others like him. I'm sorry if it's a little much, you don't have to answer. Izuku responded to the silence with a defeated expression, already turning around to walk away. You should be there for her, he answered, making Midoriya freeze for a second. Be there for her, he asked himself, but he could only imagine the downsides. What could he do to help? What could he bring to Toga's life that would help her with her blood problem other than more blood? He hardly imagined that allowing her to remain addicted to drinking blood was the solution. What can a person like me do for her? She's an outcast like you, isn't she? I'm sure you know what it's like to be alone, without anyone having your back. The man suggested, leaving Midoriya in silence. If there's anything a loner needs, it'd be a friend that can understand them. You don't need to make things so damn complicated with finding answers, just try and hear her out. Yet Midoriya remained still as the doubts that plagued him all of his life returned once more, preventing him from taking action. Was he able to do something like that? To be there when someone needed him? Was a useless reject able to be someone's pillar of support? The pillar that they needed him to be? What's the matter? You got quiet. Am I really the right person to do that? To be her friend? He more so asked himself than he did ask the stranger. As a response, the man chuckled a little before bursting out with pure laughter. Izuku only looked back at him with confusion and offense as he watched the grown man hold in his stomach while laughing. Why was he laughing at him? Sorry kid, but you don't know just how ridiculous you sounded there. What do you mean? He asked as the man tried his best to regain his composure. What are you doing? Asking her out? You're so damn nervous it's killing me. But I'm serious. I don't know if I'm really going to be a good friend for her or not, at least the friend that he needs. The boy blushed lightly out of embarrassment. Sighing to himself, the man removed his shades and made direct eye contact, allowing the boy to see his now serious yet encouraging eyes. Hidden behind them was a recognizable yet alien form of pain, an emptiness just like Izuku knew, yet by the looks of it there was a faint shine in his eyes as he spoke. Listen, you've already done so much more than anyone else can be bothered to do, but you're too insecure, and quite frankly it's getting on my nerves. He stated honestly. Stop thinking so much and just throw yourself out there already. Because I'm damn sure that she needs you just like you needed someone too. Are you sure? Certain. He ended his speech before putting on his shades again. But I gotta say, I'm impressed that there's a kid like you who's so thoughtful. Really? Is that a bad thing? Not at all. Again Izuku took his new advice to heart, trying his best to lift his spirits. But the pressure of what's to come or where things might go wrong still weighed heavily on his heart. The crushing self-doubt remained, yet it no longer hurt as much as before. "Thank you so much for helping me, I really felt stuck there," Izuku thanked, feeling a small weight lift from his chest. "No problem. Matter of fact, us outcasts should help each other out more often," the man teased. As Izuku turned to leave, a sudden realization made him turn back around, a strange mystery that came about. "Oh, what's your name?" "It's Dabi, for the moment at least," the man stated before walking away, almost disappearing behind the street corner. As the man walked away, Izuku took a second to recenter himself, to refocus his own thoughts and calm his mind. In a way it was fate itself that brought Dabi to him, as the same went for Toga and even Kurogiri in a way. The universe was throwing all of its challenges and answers right at his face, and now was about time that he used the answers that he was given. "It's time to stop doubting myself." Soon Kurogiri appeared again behind Izuku, ready to take him home. "Was your conversation enlightening?" "Yeah, it really was." "And what did you take from it?" The shadow man wondered curiously. "That I should stop doubting myself so much," he said, gripping his fist out of motivation and a newfound confidence. "If I want to save people, then I can't hesitate so much. So from now on, I want to be sure that I'm making the right decisions, I want to be sure of myself. And it starts now, with helping Toga. I will help her, by being her friend." What a strange boy, but I must admit he's gone leaps and bounds already. The rate at which Midoriya grew never ceased to amaze Kurogiri. Hours ago he was filled with a crippling self-doubt. Now, after hearing the things that he needed to hear, he boasted an unwavering resolve like the one he most often showed in private. He wasn't able to provide the solutions that he was looking for, but instead he regained confidence in himself. That alone was something to be proud of. His sheer will is simply staggering. If it weren't for his own insecurities holding him back, then there'd be very little stopping him from seeing his goals through. The man observed as the two disappeared from sight. No longer was Izuku going to spend so much time thinking, regretting his own decisions thus far. Instead, he needed to grasp the confidence in himself, the power that was given to him through Sensei's efforts, and act on his own conviction. Because now, after months of training, he needed to finally act on the hopes and dreams that he's been chasing this whole time. And it starts with that girl. For Izuku, the following day felt like his first true step towards his ultimate goals, the real initiation that would make or break his future. What came before was only the training, but here and now was the real deal, the start of his life. And it all began on a seemingly simple school day. Once the final bell rang and hordes of teenagers evacuated, all that remained were the stragglers. Among them, Izuku slowly made his way out of the building, creeping through. The nervous wreck of a boy was made even more anxious by his promise he made the other day, to give that girl his blood after school. Yet as simple as the thought was, he was still made anxious by his own thoughts. Seemingly anything could spook him as his eyes shifted every which way. He couldn't stop thinking about Toga, what she would do to him or what he would do to her. As frightening as she was, he was more daunted by the task at hand, to help save her. The simple objective was only complicated by endless thoughts, answers to questions which only led to more doubt and despair. What if he couldn't save her? What if he wasn't enough to save her? Baby steps, he calmed himself, but as he walked forward his knees began to buckle under his own self-inflicted pressure. Rather than outright leaving the school, he instead went to the back of the school, situated in a shadowy area that was hard to see, more convenient for him to meet with Toga. But as he entered the shady end of campus, his heart began thumping louder and louder from the anxiety that plagued his mind. It felt like his body was on overdrive, picking up on the faintest of sounds, spotting the most distant movements. Izuku waited what felt like eternity for the blonde girl, snapping towards every sound that he heard as though he were an animal in the wild. It felt almost illegal what he was doing, and probably looked the part too, but in reality it was all in his head. Eventually there came the soft sounds of footsteps, scaring Midoriya enough to cower behind the small shrub that he stood beside. He tried to cover his mouth and settle his breathing, but his panic rose to unbearable heights as the footsteps grew closer and closer. Boo! Ah! Izuku yelped, leaping back onto his feet in a cat-like manner. Standing in front of him was none other than Toga, laughing hysterically and wiping tears from her eyes. For a moment he felt as though he was meeting All for One for the first time again, but afterwards the mountain of anxiety was quickly replaced by embarrassment. He could guess that he looked ridiculous in that moment, but some of the nervousness lingered regardless of the fact. "You look so funny, Izuku. Like a little kid," Toga exclaimed with tears. Right. Sorry," Midoriya apologized. "I just got nervous again." "You're always a little nervous when you're around me. Am I really that pretty?" Toga teased, not letting up. After a few more playful jabs, Toga finally breathed a sigh of relief before pulling out her backpack and placing it in front of her. "What's that?" Izuku asked, curiously observing as the teenager pulled out what seemed like medical equipment. "You like it? I stole this from a hospital a little while ago, thought it'd be useful." She almost congratulated herself as she made a makeshift drain. Her equipment consisted of a syringe attached to a tube leading to an IV bag. Beside her she also pulled out a large book for basics on medical and surgical techniques. "Let's see. Roll up the sleeve and insert the needle directly in the vein," she read aloud as she stitched together the parts needed. With unease, Izuku sat still as the girl rolled up his sleeve and poked the needle into his arm. Unlike the normal, professional way that blood was extracted, this process was a little more painful. The stabbing sensation that he felt remained as Himeko used a miniature pump to shift the blood out of the boy, forcing him to feel the blood leave his body in a rather irritating way. To say he was uncomfortable was an understatement. From the dirt he sat on to the cold needle that he was injected with, he couldn't help but feel his heart race a little more. But rather than focus on the terrible sensations, Izuku tried his best to distract himself. He thought up a few subjects for small talk before giving up halfway and instead asked the questions that were on his mind. "Since when did you know how to do this?" he asked rather abruptly, catching the girl off guard. Since today," she admitted proudly, making the boy's heart sink. "I thought I should do my best to drain every last drop of you for myself, and cutting a hole into you wouldn't be my best bet. So I thought I should steal a few supplies and make this a bit more professional." Figures, a girl like her wouldn't know a thing about medicine, Izuku realized. Still, at least she's trying, as strange as this is. "Well, what about your quirk?" he shot back. "What about my quirk? I just want to know more about it," he admitted. "If you can drink blood to look like other people, then why do you want my blood?" As the girl used her hands to squeeze the miniature pump to extract the blood, she stopped for a moment to think of an answer before resuming. "My quirk doesn't need me to drink so much, but it's like eating sweets. The taste, the texture. I can't get enough of it," she explained with a crazed demeanor. With every reaction and response, Midoriya could feel his blood pressure rising. Slowly his small sense of security was being stripped away the more he discovered about the strange girl that sat before him. But on the bright side, he now knew the truth behind her lust for blood. "She's crazy," he thought. It took every fiber of his being not to let his rising panic show. Instead he had to chuckle to himself and push through. "What about my blood? How does it taste to you?" I'd say it's sweet like chocolate, but a little bitter," she replied. "But it's better than most others." Most others, he thought, struggling not to think further ahead on that sentiment. "Say you never told me about your quirk. What's yours about?" she asked. "My quirk? Well, I don't really he began but cut himself off, realizing his mistake. Actually mine's pretty boring." "Come on, tell me." It's called Survivor. It lets me grow and adapt to certain things. Aside from letting me heal faster, my body grows faster than normal too. But I'm still learning more about it myself." "Ooh, so you're really hard to kill?" she asked with a blush and a promising look in her eyes. "Kind of. That's so cool," she replied, amazed by the concept alone. "Is it really?" "Of course. It won't matter how much you're stabbed, you won't die on me no matter what I do," she fantasized, losing the pacing on the mini pump. "Thanks," Midoriya thanked, his worry skyrocketing. He never imagined that he'd receive a quirk-related compliment. It was almost unbelievable if it weren't for how deranged it was. Yet the compliment felt woefully undeserved, fake even. "You know your quirk is cool too," he complimented in return. "Really? Yeah, really. It's useful for impersonation or infiltration, and I still have so many questions about it. Like, how does the change go when you transform? If it's all the way, then what happens to your private parts when you turn into a guy? Can you just rub off your new body? If you turn into someone shorter, do you get shorter too? Is the reverse true as well?" At the flip of a coin, Izuku's worry was no longer at the forefront of his mind. Instead, he became obsessed with the questions that desperately needed answers, many of which Toga had never thought of or even worried about. Yet as the boy mumbled away with his own form of craziness, the blonde girl smiled happily, half paying attention to what was being asked and half admiring the passion that went into his concerns. It took all her strength not to stab him out of how cute he was. "You're pretty cute when you do that, you know," she stated, saying the first thing that came to mind. Her smile grew as Midoriya was immediately at a loss for words. "Gee, thanks." Eventually the IV bag was finally filled to the brim with Izuku's blood, and after the needle was removed, his world seemed to shift rather oddly, a dizzy feeling overtaking him. "Ah, that took so long just for so little. Can stab you instead. I promise I'll be gentle," she half complained and half teased as she held her hands behind her back, likely holding a knife. But Midoriya found himself struggling to word a response. "Please, don't. What's wrong? Did I take too much?" "Yeah, I think that's it," he responded, wobbling to his feet. "And also, please don't stab me." Taking a moment to stare at her new friend, Toga smiled to herself before wrapping him in a crushing hug. The action itself confused the young boy, even more so when she kissed him on the cheek. "MMMWWAAHH. What was that about?" Izuku panicked, finally exploding out of nervousness. His cherry-red face gave away the true awkwardness that he's been trying to hide the whole time. "You're my first real friend, you know that. I just wanted to thank you again. It's been nice having someone to talk to," she confessed with rosy cheeks and an unyielding smile. However, he also noticed the small box cutter knife in her hands. She was likely on the verge of going through with stabbing the boy. "See you tomorrow, Izuku." While the girl happily skipped out of sight, the boy slumped against the wall, breathing a little heavily. His mind felt sluggish, his thoughts were now delayed, and his body felt weak. It was clear only now that he wasn't yet used to getting his blood drained. Now, missing a pint of blood, he felt like he hadn't eaten in days, the nutrients in his body disappearing in a matter of seconds. Standing beside him suddenly was none other than Kurogiri, who observed the defeated boy with patience. "That looked painful," he commented as Midoriya could only nod, slowly falling to the floor again as he tried to keep the world from spinning. "I suggest taking the day off. Plenty of rest should fix you again. Maybe refrain from allowing her to remove so much blood again," he suggested, Izuku nodding in acknowledgement. "This should help too," he said as he gave Izuku a cookie. "Thanks. It's no problem." Within a corner of the Musudafu district, a young boy vigorously trained his body. Along the filthy beachside, a field of shrapnel and ruined metal covered the sand, created by the destructive force of the young prospect. Bakugo, now having changed into his usual black tank top and gray shorts, continued to train his quirk at his usual spot. With the bright sun above, his body was coated with a layer of sweat and his hands sparkled constantly with mini explosions. In front of him were a few metal appliances scattered in different positions, targets for his new trick that he's developing. Wordlessly, he outstretched his right arm and took aim, firing what seemed like a shining tennis ball. In an instant, the ball burned a hole through the cheap microwave and detonated the target, metal scattering in the sky before falling to the soft sand below. "I can make it smaller," he thought as he took a look at his sore red palm. Again he took aim, this time making the shape of a finger gun and launching a projectile the size of a pebble. The effect was a smoking hole on the front side of a broken AC unit, scorch marks still sizzling loudly. Through his efforts in training every morning and after school, his quirk had become hundreds of times more powerful than what it was before. He's learned that he can make his explosions smaller and more precise, and with more practice he can use this skill more effectively. In the future he just might end up launching miniature rockets or a storm of pellets at his future enemies, crushing them in millions of different ways. The moves he could use and name were almost endless, and all because of the effort he was putting in now. With a wide smirk plastered over his face, he strolled over to the largest piece of scrap he could find and placed both hands on it. "Ha!" he yelled as a bright flash emanated from his hands and a loud boom rang inside his skull. Proudly he observed the ruined box before him, cracked wide open as though a monster had peeled it apart. "So, you're the one that's been cleaning up the beach, huh?" Snapping his head behind him in panic, he saw a strange man wearing a colored tracksuit observing his surroundings. Carefully the boy turned to face the mysterious man with apprehension. He eyed the skinny man with sad yellow hair curiously, trying to figure out the reason as to why he'd confront him. "Who the hell are you?" he demanded to know, but the man remained unbothered. "I'm just a stranger passing through." He avoided the question casually. "When I saw you blowing up all this scrap metal, I thought I had to see who it was." "So, are you gonna report me or something?" he asked, a small bit of worry infecting his otherwise proud and brash demeanor. "No, especially not when you're doing this town a favor," he responded, picking up a piece of charred sheet metal that laid beside him. "And you, what's your name? You must be pretty strong if you can tear this place apart by yourself." "Like hell I'd tell you. And I'm not doing anyone any favors, got that?" Bakugo yelled angrily. "If you're here to watch, then piss off. I'm only here to get stronger." "Get stronger? For what?" the strange man asked as the boy proceeded to grab the ruined scrap metal before him and toss it to the side. "That's none of your business. Screw off." If I didn't know any better, I'd say you're trying to become a hero, aren't you?" the man asked, but received no response as the boy grabbed a glass bottle. Without warning he threw it high into the sky and pointed his hand towards the falling object. Waiting a few seconds, he shot a projectile after the falling bottle, but rather than destroy it, the blast missed and fizzled out of existence soon after. "Tch, damn it," Katsuki complained as the bottle smashed against the beach shore, the water only pushing the remains further inwards. "That's a pretty dangerous way of training, you know." I know what I'm doing," he shot back as he grabbed another glass bottle, repeating the same process. The tired man watched as the boy threw more bottles up in the air, each one smashing on the shore. With each failure the boy became more frustrated until he finally yelled out in fury, kicking a soda can into a pile of trash that gathered a few steps away from him. "You're getting better. Shut up." Sitting down to rest his hands, the man stared intensely at him, trying to know more about the peculiar kid. "I'm impressed. A few months ago I remember this place being nothing more than a scrap heap. But now you can at least see the sand." Curiously, Bakugo looked around his surroundings to see the shining wasteland that he created. Every inch of the place had a buried piece of metal or glass hidden by the sand. All that really remained of the garbage dump was just a handful of appliances and some more trash. "It's no better anyway, just a big trash heap like it was before," Bakugo shrewdly replied. He didn't know what the stranger's deal was, but it was starting to get on his nerves. "Even then, I can see the effort that you've placed in cleaning the beach." "As if I didn't do this for the damn people, I did it for me." "And why's that?" the man asked, finally hitting the question he's been dying to ask. "'Cause I'm training to be the best damn hero there ever was, that's why." "Happy?" the frustrated boy shot back. Smiling, the man took another glance at the beach. Even with the mess, there was still a tinge of hope for the place. In no time a cleaning crew could take a day or two to throw out what remained of the trash. Or better yet, "It's no difference to me, but I think you can do better than smash up some debris and call it training. Anyone with a wrecking ball can do what you did in a few days." He taunted ruthlessly, infuriating the blonde kid. "The hell did you just say? If you're trying to be the best of the best, then this place would have been spotless by now, but since your heart isn't in it, I guess you're just some kid playing in a sandbox." He continued to berate the boy, insulting the amount of effort and growth that he's undergone. "Off. I don't need to prove anything to you. Really, I thought you were trying to be the best hero. I haven't heard of any hero that goes around making a mess of things like you have. Off, asshole, he screamed, but he only glared at the disappointed expression from the sorry excuse of a man. You know I'm right. If you're trying to go above and beyond, then aren't you going to go the extra mile? The blonde hissed in retaliation. He knew that he was being tricked into cleaning the beach, the stranger was only pushing his buttons. But his pride and ego were seemingly in danger by this random man who wandered in. He's going to be the best hero around, there was no competition for that. But in spite of that last thought, the image of the white and red-haired boy popped into his head, his arrogant face staring directly at him in place of the tired man. Just what are you going to do about it? Bakugo asked, both angry and curious. I'll be jogging around this area tomorrow afternoon. I'd like to see this place clean of all the trash for once. And if it's not, then I guess you really are a pushover. Off, the boy yelled yet again, but to his surprise the man began jogging away, not another word out of him. Like hell I'm gonna clean this damn place. I'm no one's pawn, he yelled to the sky, but his ego said otherwise. He remembered the burning hatred he felt towards Icy Boy when he aced the exercise with no effort. It drew all of the attention he won over, and rather than have him as the talk of the class, it was that kid that got the spotlight. He thought that he was better than him. That shit just won't slide, not now, not ever. Yet as he looked around he realized that he had no feat of his own that could trump that. The best he's done, aside from easily kicking ass on the first day, was make a hazardous field of sandy shrapnel on a beach no one uses. Quite pathetic when he put it like that. And add to it the words of that asshole. Quote, I'm gonna clean this damn beach. He decided, looking at the time to see that he still had plenty of daylight left. I'll show him. I'm not some pushover. Making haste he made his way out of the area and towards the nearest market. If he was going to do things right, then he needed proper tools for the job. I'll shatter his damn expectations. Like the best damn cleaner he's ever seen. Elsewhere, inside of the Night Eye Agency, Mirio continued his basic training with the clairvoyant hero. Within the cold concrete room the two exchanged blows with such speed that any normal person would have a hard time tracking them. Sir Night Eye bobbed and weaved through the string of jabs and punches while returning the attacks. Likewise Mirio used his quirk to avoid the attacks. Attacking and counter-attacking, dodging and phasing, all of this was done at a near-inhuman pace that Mirio was just about able to keep up with. The blonde-haired boy observed with awe as the man easily avoided two of his jabs and returned the favor with a punch to the gut, only for the counter to phase through and leave him open for a counterattack. Instinctively the teen capitalized, throwing a kick to the legs but watching as Sir jumped and spun in the air. But rather than hitting air, his leg instead slammed against Mirio's raised arm, suspending him in the air. But in the exact same instance his other foot came crashing down onto Mirio's chest, forcing the air to escape from his lungs. Having seen his opening, Sir Night Eye recovered and delivered a blow to the face, ending the fight as Mirio fell to the floor in defeat. You're still far too slow to keep up with me. And you're still having trouble phasing through my moves. Night Eye stated, fixing his glasses. Yeah, Mirio wheezed, but I'm getting better, aren't I? That's true, but your skills need more refining. Night Eye lectured sternly. He never stopped to acknowledge Mirio's improvements, only criticized him for his failures. But it's through his customized teachings that Mirio was able to learn from his mistakes and continue to grow from the hardship he endured. Sitting up from the floor and recovering his breath again, he thought of a strange question, a side of his that he wasn't quite trained for. With his rigorous physical training there was one other aspect that needed more training. And that was his leadership skills. Sir. Can I ask you a question? Is it important enough that it must interrupt our training? He asked, to which the boy nodded. Then what's your question? For a brief second Mirio wondered how to phrase his question. It was such a strangely broad topic with a biased answer, yet he knew that he was the right man to ask. How can I look more like a leader? He asked sincerely, receiving a puzzled expression. Explain. Well, All Might wants me to become a figurehead for the top freshman class at UA. He said it was part of my training, but part of me thinks he wants to skip out on some work. He joked casually, but unable to fish for any laughs. Are you unable to ask him yourself as his pupil? Not really, he confessed, inwardly shocking Night Eye. Between his hero work and his teaching work I haven't seen him since the day before yesterday. So I thought that you'd know something about being a leader too. As All Might not making time for his pupil. Sir Night Eye wondered. He'd imagined with the two being in the same place for hours at a time that they'd get more time for each other. But the likely impediment was All Might's overuse of his limited time. Come to think about it, he hasn't even revealed his natural form yet, has he? He continued to wonder with concern. That's an easy question, Night Eye replied. As a leader you must become a beacon of hope for the younger generation. Through becoming that beacon the rest would be compelled to follow your instruction. Right, but how do you become a beacon of hope? Mirio asked, making the subject trickier for the #1 All Might fan. Then you must become more like All Might himself. You must mirror All Might's best qualities, Night Eye lectured. For example, you must be funny, a trait that you sorely lack. What? I'm funny, Mirio replied, almost baffled. Then tell me a joke. Why did the chicken cross the road? That's not funny. It's hard when you put me on the spot. Mirio sighed. Secondly, Night Eye continued, you must be calm and collected during every situation. Both of these traits can give others a sense of calm. At seeing Mirio's expression the man only sighed, shaming himself for not having lectured the boy in what seemed like common sense to him. All of this time he'd been so focused on training the teen's body and mind for All Might's even rougher training that he failed to instruct him to the best of his ability. In part he also expected All Might to take care of the more practical issues, but never did he think that he'd neglect the boy's training. But, as your instructor I strongly recommend that you take your advice from All Might, your true teacher. He stated, inwardly punishing himself for his lack of hindsight. As much as I've taught you, all of my advice stems from the lessons he's taught me and the things I've learned as his sidekick. If he's telling you to guide those younger than you, then it's because he believes you to be more than capable of doing so. You really think so? I know so. With answers at hand, Mirio's bright and cocky smile returned to him yet again. He sprung to his feet and readied his fist for more action. By the way, has All Might given you any of his hair recently? No. Why would he do that? Mirio questioned. No reason. Now, back to training. Night Eye swept the question under the rug as fast as possible. But the answer seemed to create more questions as well. Why hasn't All Might given him one for all yet? Mirio's body is already a suitable vessel, so why hesitate in giving it to him? The very next day held substantial improvements for Izuku, who grew both physically and mentally from the day prior. Waiting idly by for the school day to end, he was yet again absorbed by his relationship with Toga and where it might go. The crippling fear of the future was a consistent pain of his, this new variable in his life being no different. For one, his body still felt a bit strange after losing so much blood, but with a fixed diet his body could return to normal. Who knows, maybe even his quirk can help him produce more blood. It was also an aspect he wanted to focus on. But more importantly, Izuku wasn't as nervous as he was before. Waiting behind the building after school, Izuku stood tall and firm, trying his best to conquer his unease. His heart still beat at a faster rate while waiting in the sketchy area, but the slightest noise wasn't going to scare him anymore. In his hands he also ate a chocolate chip cookie in hopes that the extra sugar could compensate for the thinning blood that he may get, but part of him felt as though he was going overboard. Eventually the person he was waiting for arrived, now with an even chipper attitude than the one she left with. Hey, she replied, almost blushing at the sight of the boy. For a moment it looked as though she was gripping something behind her back, but when she calmed herself she seemed to let go of the mysterious object. You look a lot happier today. Did something happen? He casually asked, noticing her unwavering happiness ooze out of her. Of course, that blood of yours lasted the whole day. I didn't even feel hungry this morning, she exclaimed with a passionate enthusiasm that even brought a smile to Izuku. At least that means I'm doing something right. Speaking of which, are you gonna use the same needle you used yesterday? Yep, but don't worry, I cleaned it in the public bathroom. There's so much wrong with that sentence. He sighed, but was unable to react. If he wanted to remain friends with Toga, then he had to get along with her for the time being. And at least a sort of clean needle would be better than another box cutter knife to the palm again. Soon the two got into position, sitting on the soft, warm grass as yet another IV bag was slowly filled with blood that looked a tad brighter than normal. "Have you been eating too many sweets? This blood looks different," Toga interrogated. "Sorry, I tried to eat more to recover the blood I lost yesterday. I hope it doesn't taste worse." He apologized for the rather strange concern. For a moment the lunatic stared deep into his eyes, making her feelings crystal clear to him. "And would you like a cookie? My mom made them and they're pretty good," he offered. He had to do something to ease the tension. In return she hesitated. For a few moments she had to deeply consider the offer before accepting it cautiously. Izuku didn't know why she was suddenly so careful, but once she took a bite her cheeks went redder than normal. So good." In response she suddenly pulled out her box cutter knife and used it to quickly slash a thin wound onto the boy's palm, shocking him more than it pained him. "Ow, what was that for?" "It's my thank you for being so nice. I just couldn't help myself this time," she said with a smile so bright that it thoroughly confused him. Why would she do something so weird? But as quickly as the interaction happened he was left wondering as she mindlessly drained the blood from his body. He had no words and neither did she, leaving the two in awkward silence. Or at least awkward to him, for Toga was stuck humming a tune to herself with a near-permanent blush. Midoriya could tell that she was enjoying herself, a warm energy radiating from her. It was clear in her cheeks, her tone and her permanent smile that she was loving every bit of this day. And that made him all the more confused. Does she really love blood that much? But the teen was careful not to push his luck this time around. A friendship, at least by what he knew, wasn't made in 1 or 2 days, especially not a deep one. He wanted desperately to know more about Toga, her past, her quirk, her need for blood. It fascinated as well as horrified him to wonder these things. Yet he practiced his own restraint by not blurting out these burning questions. Over time he'll learn, by becoming her friend. "Yeah, I'll be her friend, that doesn't sound so hard," he thought as he glanced at her warm smile. Little did he realize that he too was blushing, thinking that he brought her that kind smile. She almost looked normal were it not for her firmly holding a needle on one hand and an IV full of blood in the other. Finally came the time for them to leave. The girl's smile never faltered as she waved goodbye and left the drained boy on the ground. His wooziness was much less of a problem than before, but the ground vibrated nonetheless. But rather than worry about his current physical state he instead smiled to himself, staring at the clear blue sky above him. As he laid flat on the grass Toga's smile remained copied and pasted onto his own face, his heart fluttering as well. From the many things he imagined would happen once he became a villain he never thought that he'd be making someone smile so much. Inside he felt a strangely warm feeling in his stomach that overshadowed his looming hunger. It was a burning sensation of feeling accomplished, like his whole life had led up to this very moment. A warmth that was hotter than any summer day but more pleasant than any meal he's ever eaten. It was the feeling of finally achieving his dreams. And it felt wonderful. Elsewhere inside of a cool, crisp room was an office space devoid of people save for one man. A familiar thin, yellow-haired man was busy completing important paperwork for his teaching duties. Toshinori Yagi, still wearing his usual bright yellow striped suit, sifted through the abnormal stack of paper before him. In front of him were the scheduled lesson plans that needed to be taken care of before they're promptly forgotten of. Future lessons, subjects, topics and exercises needed to be planned out as much as a year in advance, but for a busy and tired man as Yagi, these obligations only piled on. For a moment the teacher rolled away from the daunting paperwork and stretched. With all the work he's put in he's only been able to plan out roughly 10% of his work, which wasn't at all a good sign of progress. I really wish I was good at this, he thought to himself, staring at the sheets of paper that only had messy scribbles on them. In all my days of harrowing I've never been able to complete the paperwork that came after. Only Night Eye was able to keep up with it. On cue a ring from his cell phone distracted him from his thoughts. Looking at his phone and seeing the caller ID a sense of awkwardness entered his mind as he answered. Hello Night Eye, it's not often that I get a phone call from you nowadays. Hello All Might, And yes, I'm aware this is a strange occurrence. Sitting upright and fully serious, Toshinori couldn't help but wonder what he was being called for. Save for the call from months ago, the two hadn't spoken in years, and even then they'd only ever discussed more immediate and pressing matters. If someone as serious as he were to call, then there was definitely something wrong. Is something wrong? Nothing at all, he responded, surprising the thin man. Nothing. No, I only wanted to ask if you were preoccupied. Am I occupied? For what? He wondered. Well, I'm trying to complete my teaching lesson plans for the year before I forget. But since I'm not well versed in paperwork, I'm struggling to meet my deadlines. I see. Could it also be that you struggle with planning ahead? Night Eye wondered, further confusing Yagi. What? I'm sorry to say this, but even as a hero you've never been one to keep track of your civic duties. As per law, you're required to report and file your dutiful actions, but your lightning speed response times left you, and promptly me, with hundreds of reports per day. The man recalled. Speaking of which, who does your paperwork now? That would be Naomasa Tsukauchi from the police department. Nearly a year ago we agreed that all of my paperwork would go to him and his office, since he learned who I was and all. I see, the former sidekick responded, receiving the answer to his question. So, did you call to see what I was doing? Toshinori wondered, knowing that there was much more to it than that. No, but I wanted to see what might be occupying you this time. Because only a while ago Mirio called me, saying that he'll be appearing at my agency for training again. Upon hearing that statement, a wave of anxiety and realization crashed into Toshinori all at once, nearly making him fall from his rolling chair. He knew that he was forgetting something throughout his day. It wasn't since yesterday that he wondered what sort of training he'll do once the boy grows. Ah, is that so? Yes, and pardon my intrusion, but I was also wondering what sort of plans you had for him, seeing as how you're lesson planning at the moment. Well, for the moment I gave him a goal. To teach the top freshman class a few lessons he's learned, he replied, receiving only temporary silence. And then, I'll have to think of something. I see. A tense silence befell the two. The teacher could feel the judgment radiating from the other side, a quiet moment of contemplation that only left him more anxious. It has recently come to my attention, Sir Night Eye began, that you've been rather absent from Mirio's life. And of the faults you have. I never considered you to be so neglectful. Neglectful. Teachers do not leave their students with mere substitutes for longer than needed. He explained, and as his new teacher, I find it disgraceful that your student comes to me for advice rather than you. Now less confused, Yagi's heart sank, knowing the type of mistake he was making. With his busy schedule he wasn't able to properly integrate Mirio into his schedule like he wanted to, instead being restricted by the time limit on his transformation. Furthermore, I get the feeling that you're not taking your role as a teacher seriously enough. I understand your concerns, but I promise that I'm doing what I can for Mirio. He replied, hearing a sigh at the other end. Then why doesn't he have one for all yet? Excuse me. Our agreement was that I'd help train your new pupil and mold him into the perfect candidate for one for all. But not only have you failed to properly make him your own pupil, you've also failed to bestow him with your power. That's because his body isn't ready yet. He made the excuse but received a swift counter. That's false. His body is primed for your quirk. Frankly, I believe his physical strength is above average for his age. Well, his mind isn't properly suited to take on the power. Hence the training. Night Eye replied, a little more irritated this time. But he'll never receive that training if you don't make him aware of it. Even still, he hasn't been able to fully realize the meaning of being number one. Something I'm sure will happen once he's been thrown into action. With that, another sigh was heard, making Toshinori sweat a little. It was hard to explain why he refrained from Mirio's training, and it was something he couldn't disclose to his former sidekick either. If anything, it seems as though you're avoiding the entire reason for our collaboration. You give me the new wielder for one for all and I prepare his body for it. What is taking you so long to accept that? He questioned, demanding to know the answer. He's just not ready yet. Raising his voice and slamming his desk, Sir Night Eye exploded with a confrontational anger. Why can't you accept that I've already given you the perfect vessel? He's not yet ready, Yagi responded with equal ferocity. Why? Because he doesn't know anything about being the symbol of peace. Silence fell yet again, the sidekick finally getting the answer he was looking for with much struggle. All Might's stubbornnesses was an incredible obstacle to topple, but finally he knew the crux of the problem. As the number one hero, Toshinori began, I became increasingly more aware of the things I can and can't do in this world, as well as the things that the world needed me to give up. I cannot, under any circumstances, push my own ideology onto a boy and force him to become the new face of the world without knowing if he can handle it. I need to entrust the future into the hands of the next person, and to fail in doing that can only mean disaster for this world. With a big huff, Toshinori revealed the true dilemma that he faced, the main reason for his hesitance. There are certain things that require more than a strong body and mind in order to keep one for all away from all for one. And that's a strong will. He confessed, I need to see the full extent of the boy's capabilities before I entrust him with my power. I need to know for certain that he'll be able to change the world for the better. Like I and many have before me, and like many will after. Yet again silence enveloped the two, Toshinori feeling relieved yet guilty for revealing his true feelings. He knew that the young Tagata wasn't malicious in any sense, however, he has yet to know what his true character was, what his real hopes were, or whether he's capable of bearing such responsibility. But most importantly, he doesn't know if he could truly accept this position. This is no easy burden to carry. It comes at a steep price, and whether Mirio can pay it is still up in the air. He thought. Cutting away the silence, Sir Night-Eye finally responded, firm and attentive. I understand completely, he said, but just know that you don't have as much time as you think. With every day that passes you miss out on more time you could be spending teaching the boy. I know. And that's why I'm taking my job seriously. Without anything else to say or ask, Night-Eye hung up, allowing Toshinori to breathe a large sigh of relief. He laid his head just beside the stacks of paper and rested for just a moment. I need to focus on what's important. And that's the future of the world. Likewise, many miles away, Sir Night-Eye rested his head over his two fists in silence. While staring at the familiar-looking stacks of paper he sighed to himself. If only things were simpler. The waning sun rested over the horizon once more as Toshinori Yagi set off for his jog. The calm, warm air contradicted his current state of anxiety. The phone call from many hours ago still affected him as he casually jogged through the outskirts of the city. Even with a tired body his mind never rested, reminding him of his mistakes that he's made in being a mentor. He shamed himself for not taking greater care of his student, but in the end he knew in his heart that Mirio wasn't yet ready for the responsibility that was ahead of him. Is this what Nana and Gran Torino thought when training me? He wondered. Of the few lessons he's taught Mirio, all of them were derived from things he's learned from his two masters way back when. Lessons and values he's acquired from the tutelage of those greater than him were things that he needed to pass down again, but he failed to imagine what else he could give. But his biggest and most prominent fear was leaving the world defenseless and without a proper guardian. It was a world that couldn't rely on him for protection, a world that needed a new symbol of peace. A world that needed Mirio. Preparing for this eventuality was meant to be his only task now, but for every cry for help he always found himself jumping into action. While before his thoughtless actions of justice were a benefit, now they were seemingly a liability. And when the thought of that future came to mind he could only shame himself for doing the right thing. These fears and contradictions created an anxiety that made his heart pound harder than the jogging itself. He had to fight himself on the matter of whether to prepare for the future, or to continue fighting with every fiber of his being. However, midway into his jog he spotted a glimmer of hope in his dilemma in the form of a beach. He'd forgotten how clean the roughed-up sands used to look like, and seeing them for the first time in ages caught him off guard. I am in the north side, aren't I? He asked himself, looking around the familiar structures and answering his question. But the beach side was so clean, so pristine that they shone brighter than the aging buildings around him. The further he went the cleaner the area got, and with them appeared large trash bags the size of boulders. As he jogged, these bags became more frequent until soon there was a sea of plastic blackness as vast as the ocean in front of them. And in the middle of it all was a lone blonde teen who slaved away. The shock was clear on his face upon seeing the boy. Had he done all of this? Was he responsible for cleaning the area? The curiosity forced Toshinori to enter the beach himself. Up close he could see the contents of the bags more clearly. Hundreds of shards of metal, glass, rubber and plastic filled the inside of the many bags stuffed with trash. It was amazing how much garbage was stored away under the many black trash bags, but more amazing was seeing the young Bakugo at work. Wearing his usual black tank top and black shorts, he also had a cart beside him. He was equipped with many rolls of trash bags, rakes and shovels. But the most important features were the battery-powered lamp and headlamp that laid in the cart as well. Had this boy stayed up all night working as well? His answer came the second the irate boy turned to face him. His clear, confident smirk disguised the dark eye bags and radiated a determination that Yagi hadn't ever seen before. "I completed your damn challenge, old man," he stated with a hint of victory and exhaustion in his voice. But Toshinori could only look around in bewilderment at his surroundings. "You were really able to clean this place in one morning?" "Yeah, I did. I stayed up all night to do twice the work. Goes to show that I'm no pushover," the boy exclaimed with pride and confidence. "You stayed up the whole night. What about your parents? They must have worried about you." "They don't care. I can do whatever the hell I want as long as I don't get myself killed." Taking one more look around him, Toshinori was flabbergasted by what this teenage boy could do in one day. He didn't even notice the eye bags during school until now, revealing just how hard he worked to prove himself. "So, you really are trying to be number one, huh?" he asked, now having seen the extent of the boy's convictions. "Sure am, and there's not a damn thing that can stop me. Not this beach, not that damn icy hot, no one." Icy hot, could he be referring to Shoto Todoroki? With one thought, Toshinori was able to piece together the true reason for this whole event. He remembered the first day of class, how Endeavor's son was able to complete the exercise instantly, outshining Bakugo's feat of taking out 2 students at once. And for a kid who claims to be the future number one, it must have ruined his ego. I see. He needed to show that he's not to be underestimated, he realized, answering his own hidden question. Smiling, Toshinori could only admire the boy's tenacity. Cleaning a sea of trash in a day's time was no easy feat, especially for a teenager. It goes to show why he's in the best class at UA. "I'm proud of you, you're more bite than bark, it seems." "Shut up, I don't need your stupid praises. I'm showing this damn neighborhood what I'm made of and nothing else. Still, you've done a great service to this city. I'm sure they'll thank you greatly." "I said I'm not here for praises. I'm here on my own terms, got that?" He adamantly refused. Toshinori couldn't understand why this boy was so against being thanked, but he knew that he couldn't change that. "Regardless, I thank you on behalf of everyone around. Whether you believe it or not, you've done something that no one else has bothered to do. That alone is a great feat." I said shut it. Smiling, the man walked away without another word. For someone of such strong integrity, his pride was just as strong. Perhaps it was because he refused to follow Yagi's advice before that he refuses to admit to helping the town. Or perhaps he really was only thinking about himself, either or seemed to be likely answers. But in the end, Toshinori could only admire the tenacity he's displayed, no matter how much he wants to deny it. And all by just pointing him in the right direction, he thought, rounding back to his own dilemma. Contrary to Mirio, Bakugo was able to accomplish so much with a little teasing and an ultimatum. Never did Toshi have to guide his hand and hammer in lessons that he needed to instill. With a little test he was able to reveal his true character that, while it didn't quite make an admirable hero, certainly made for a remarkable one. Maybe that's it. Maybe all he needs is a little push in the right direction. Mirio was a well-meaning young lad, but Toshi had yet to see the strength of his resolve. One sparring match certainly wasn't going to cut it, and neither was another simple test going to do it. Because as well-meaning as he was, Yagi had to be certain that he was making the right decision, that Tagata was capable of becoming the symbol of peace like many have before. Now relieved, the tired blonde man had his answer, the root of his problem. And in knowing that, solving it would be easier than ever. As he jogged away he brainstormed more tests for his pupil, each one trickier than the last. Meanwhile, Katsuki Bakugo sat still on the beachside. Surrounded by trash bags he could no longer remember the trash heap from yesterday, only seeing hundreds of trash bags instead. It was hard work, raking and shoveling through the coarse sand, and even harder having to go through school with no sleep or energy. But his pride wouldn't allow anything less than that, and seeing the lack of exposed trash made his confident smirk return. It was through his own efforts that the stupid beach was shining, and although there was still the trouble of having to notify the garbage crew of their laziness, he was still proud of his own work. Staring off at the vast ocean, his tired body finally rested. In place of his fiery tenacity was now a wave of fatigue unlike anything he's felt before. Shutting his eyes and laying in the sand, he decided to envelope himself in the calm atmosphere. The warm wind pressed against his cheek, the crashing waves of the ocean in front of him, the distant sun hanging onto the horizon. All of these things filled the boy with peace and tranquility, rewarding his efforts with a unique experience he'd never felt before. They'd better be grateful I helped them out, otherwise no one in this damn neighborhood would get to see this, he thought as his eyes closed and his mind slowed to a grinding halt. His mind soon began to drift away at sea, his body having fallen asleep from fatigue. Midway into yet another ordinary day, the cafeteria at UA High sprung with life. In much the same way a normal school operates, the looks, sounds and atmosphere of the area was no different to any other high school, status or not. And also just as similar are the seating arrangements for the freshman classes, which were still under development. Friends old and new interconnected with each other and gave way to brand new friend groups that would last for the rest of their school lives. One of said groups was that of Ochako, Iida, Mina and Asui, unlikely and frankly unusual people that have grown fond of one another. The four sat at a table in the middle of the lunch rush cafeteria, surrounded by copious loud voices. "Geez, today's as packed as ever, isn't it?" the pink-skinned girl complained. It was a little hard to even hear her own thoughts with the hustle and bustle of the cafeteria. Of course, with a school as big as UA, the lunches are packed with students from all courses, Iida informed. Still, there's barely any room to breathe sometimes. You can say that again, Asui complained as a rowdy group continued to yell in the distance. But the rice is pretty good, Ochako added, ready to shift the conversation into a more interesting topic. Mina grinned from ear to ear. "Hey guys," she began, "who do you think is the strongest in our class?" That's not really a hard question. It's definitely Shoto, Asui answered. "I don't know, Bakugo is very tough as well, though his attitude needs fixing," Iida argued. "That's right, didn't he take out you and Tokiyami that one time?" The frog girl remembered, making the boy sigh. "Please don't bring it up. It hurts to even remember. But it's not as bad as what Shoto did to Denki and Mineta. Word is that they both needed to sleep with hot blankets for days." Mina interjected. "That's quite a stretch, but we all saw it, didn't we? They were popsicles," she rebutted. "I guess both of them are more or less competing for the top spot, aren't they?" Ochako imagined as she stuffed her face with rice. In the distance she could see both boys sitting in different spots, both with drastically different emotions. The angry blonde could only sneer as he looked ahead of him, probably eyeing Todoroki. The white and red-haired boy, on the other hand, seemed as calm and uncaring as ever. It wasn't hard to see that the two had a rivalry going on, even if it was a one-sided one. "What about you, Ochako? What's your opinion?" "Me, well, it's pretty hard to choose one. Both of them were pretty impressive on their own. But I say it's Todoroki," Mina declared. "And I say it's Bakugo," Iida countered, though it was a bit odd as to why the two were so opposed to one another. "Say, why don't we figure it out?" Asui suggested. "You start, Mina." It's obvious. His ice quirk is just too strong to beat, that's why. And that's not even mentioning his left side." "I'll have to agree there," Iida conceded. Although he has yet to reveal it, he's most likely harboring a fire quirk as well, given that his father is a well-known fire user. As to why he doesn't use it remains a mystery. If his ice is so powerful, just imagine what he could do with his fire. Mina continued boasting, seeing her take as the better one. Then what about Bakugo? He's strong too. Of course. No matter how cruel and despicable his personality is, his strength is one of a kind. The way he was able to evaluate Tokiyami's weakness and counter my strategy are two things I've yet to see from Todoroki. Iida stated his case. His quirk is no match for his innate instincts for battle, and I doubt Todoroki's quirk alone could stop him should the two fight. If they fight, ooh, that's a good idea. Maybe we should ask them if they could duke it out after school. She said. Don't. It's against school rules for students to fight unless instructed by teachers and under a controlled environment. He countered. And you, Ochako, you haven't picked one yet? Asui asked the distracted girl. Oh, well, it's pretty hard to pick when they're both impressive, she repeated, but thinking further she decided to go with her first thought. But Bakugo is pretty obsessed with strength, and I doubt he'll sit still until it's settled that he's the number one of our class. That's true. His confidence and ego are that which I've never seen before. Even if Todoroki poses a challenge, Bakugo won't rest until his pride is satiated. Iida concluded. Guess you're right about that. Mina agreed. Even then, Bakugo only sees things in terms of strength too. There's probably a reason why he wants to be number one. Ochako wondered again. While the whole class chalked up Bakugo's crassness as arrogance and ego, Uraraka was the only one to see past his crude demeanor. Because as mean as he was to her, she could somewhat see through him. If you could have used that power of yours more effectively, then you would have been fine anyway. No need to waste my time. He's still a big jerk though, she recalled, grinding her teeth in anger. There's gotta be more to it than just being strong. Why else would he save me during the exams? Still, neither of them are gonna get to be class president. That spot's reserved for Yaoyarozu. Mina boasted for her friend, completely off topic. Right, out of everyone she's the most collected of the class. Asui commented. Yes, though it's a shame that I'm losing the position of class president. I'm glad it's going to a person who's deserving. It must that not many people voted for you, huh? Mina added, but rather than be upset, Iida only smiled. Of course. But if it's going to be anyone that beats me, it's surely someone just as intelligent as her. I myself still have lots to learn. Yeah, that's why you're getting class deputy. Asui commented. And I shall do my best to fulfill my role with every fiber of my being. That's pretty extreme, Ochako sighed. As for the subject of the matter, Katsuki Bakugo sat alone during his lunch, away from any especially loud or obnoxious types. It was hard for him to think under all the noise. That and he hadn't developed any bonds of his own either, but it was less about circumstances and more about choice. He wasn't especially bothered by sitting alone. Back in middle school he had friends to sit with, but they were more cronies than anything else, none of which held the same passions or aspirations as he did. While he was focused on his schoolwork and aiming to be the strongest, the others worried more about getting girlfriends, playing video games and so on. For a kid as popular as Katsuki was, he certainly wasn't the social type. As he ate his homemade bento box in peace, he was approached by a strange figure, another boy with spiky bright red hair and red eyes. Bakugo could vaguely recognize him but didn't remember from where, not that he was worth remembering anyway. Hey Bakugo, this seat taken? He asked, holding his tray in front of him. The spiky-haired blonde looked him up and down quizzically. Who are you? What? I'm your classmate Eijiro Kirishima. I literally sit next to you. HMPH, whatever. And no, I'd rather sit alone than with another extra. Bakugo remarked. Rather than sneer with disgust or hatred, the boy only sighed before defiantly taking the chair in front of Bakugo. I said beat it, I'm not interested. Come on, I want to be friends. There's no harm in that, is there? Listen, I'm not looking to be friends with anyone, alright? I'm here to kickstart my hero career and that's it, no reason to be buddy-buddy with anyone. Bakugo denied firmly. Really? Sounds to me like you're only looking out for yourself. Damn right I am. Got a problem with that? No, I guess not. Kirishima agreed reluctantly. But you're really not gonna try and make friends? That seems pretty lonely to me. So what? I don't bother acknowledging anyone that's weaker than me. The way I see it, there's only one kid worth talking to in the whole damn class, and it's not you. Oh yeah, that sounds like a challenge to me. The boy smirked. What? If you're so strong then why don't we have a fight? You and me, that way you'll acknowledge me. No way, you're just gonna get blown away. No need to bother. Bakugo huffed, crossing his arms. Standing from his seat and openly challenging the boy in front of him, Kirishima began to pump himself up more and more. As if, my quirk'll keep me safe and sound. Won't even be able to feel your attacks. Now more pissed off than ever, Bakugo glared at the annoyance that stood just in front of him, just asking to get his ass kicked. But in his eyes was a fierce fire that raged defiantly, almost like a glint in his blood-red eyes that screamed confidence, but not arrogance. Whatever quirk it was that he had didn't matter, what did was the fighting spirit that he displayed from the challenge. Of course, it couldn't hold a candle to Bakugo's strength and willpower, but it at least impressed him. HMPH, you're seriously asking for a fight? From the strongest kid in our class. Tough guys like you and me are bound to fight one another, so why not do it now? He replied without losing any bit of confidence in his voice. The two stared at each other with such intensity that it sent shivers down the spines of anyone around. Other students could feel the hostility choke them as they ate, as if danger was looming around the corner. In that moment it was uncertain as to whether or not a fight would break out in the middle of the cafeteria, but one could only guess. In the end, Bakugo huffed and went to his boxed lunch, cutting the tension between them. Fine, you can sit down, but don't interrupt my lunch. Taking this as a sign of good faith, the teen sat back down and ate his own lunch in a proud silence. This didn't exactly mean they were friends, but it certainly meant that Bakugo would remember his face next time. In such way Kirishima smirked to himself. Elsewhere in the same cafeteria, two third-year students continued to have their own personal discussion, ignoring the noise around them. I'm putting my foot down here, Tamaki. Mirio stated firmly, not backing down from his opinion. The latest issue of the manga is clearly the best, hands down. That's just recency bias, it'll wear off after a day or two. His usually shy friend only waved away the strong claim. Chapter 100 on the other hand has the most impactful and emotional moments of the series, there's no changing my mind. As the two best friends were in the middle of their heated debate, two girls approached them. Hey you two, how's it hanging? The two turned to see none other than Najire Hado and her orange-haired friend Yu Yu Haya. At seeing the two familiar faces they greeted the newcomers with open arms. Oh hey girls, we were in the middle of a debate between our favorite chapter of our favorite series. Mirio explained kindly. Mirio's favorite seems to change with every new release, so it's a hassle having to fight him on these things every time. Tamaki also explained. Rather than be filled with anxiety and nervousness like he usually was, he seemed more stressed than anything, probably due to the discussion that was had. Oh wow, that's pretty cool. Anyway, Najire cut to the chase, impatient as always, I just came by to know how the rising star of our class was getting so popular. Yeah Mirio, you're kind of a hotshot now. Pretty unexpected from a guy like you, but just as impressive. Yu Yu complimented as well. It was no secret that Mirio had trained his heart and soul over the summer. His body was more chiseled than before and his new combat proficiency easily made him the top student of their class. While Najire was usurped from her spot as the number one in the school, she was far more curious about the work he's been putting in. Well, if you two gotta know then I guess I'll tell you. That was lame, Tamaki stated. I know, he sighed. To be honest, it wasn't easy at all. Sir Night-Eye is a pretty strict teacher, and he had set really high expectations for me once he saw what I could do. Sounds terrible. Tamaki shuddered. I guess, but I was able to push through it all and grow under his guidance. That's why you see the confident guy you see before you. He grinned from ear to ear, proud of the work he's been able to do. That's impressive. Classes have only just started and already people are calling you the best of our class. They're even changing it from the big two to the big three, like you said. Hado added as well. Yeah Mirio, you were able to get so strong over one summer. Tamaki complimented. Thanks guys, really. But I have a question. The blonde-haired boy asked nervously. Do any of you know how to be an inspiration to others? Quote. What? You see, Sir Night-Eye wanted me to learn more about what it's like to be a hero, and one of those things I've got to figure out is how to inspire other people. Inspire others. Just be like All Might. He's the biggest inspiration of them all. Najire responded with full confidence. Hee, thanks, but maybe some specifics would be nice. An inspiration, huh? I dunno, that's pretty tricky. Yu wondered. For a hero you should be strong, confident and reliable if you want people to look up to you. But that's such a strange question. You sure you don't want to ask us something else? The blue-haired girl wondered with curiosity. That was it really. Thanks for your help. Anytime. They answered, and with nothing else to say they abandoned the table, leaving the two alone again. She's right, what a strange question. Tamaki wondered. Is there something else you didn't tell us? Heh, yeah, you see, I'm also going to be a teacher aide for Class 1A in a few days, at Mr. Aizawa's request too, so I'm wondering how I can be a positive influence for the freshmen. A teacher aide. That's a pretty rare position, but I guess since you're the number one at the school it shouldn't be too weird. So, do you have any advice? Mirio chuckled nervously, having to seek his friend's aid once again. Sorry, but I can't help you here, Amajiki admitted, deflating his friend a little. But if there's anyone who can figure it, then it's you, Mirio. You've always been a problem solver, and I'm sure you'll be a good aide. Thanks, Tamaki. You really know what to say. It's usually the other way around, Mirio. The boy sighed, noting the reversal of their roles. Of course, Mirio couldn't outright say the full extent of his struggles to his friend, since it was supposed to be a secret that he's All Might's protege. How can he explain that he's supposed to surpass the number one hero one day? How can he compare to someone so great like him? He was truly stuck between a rock and a hard place, and of the few attempts he's made at asking for help he's been let down for the most part. Just then, calling his attention was the obnoxiously loud blaring of an alarm. The shockingly sudden occurrence distracted everyone from what they were doing. There has been a level 3 security breach. All students please evacuate promptly, said the recognizable voice overhead. Without any hesitation, hundreds of students bolted from their seats and made their way out of the lunchroom, leaving only a few too stunned to react. Level 3. That hasn't happened before, has it? Mirio asked as he observed every last person around him jolt from their seats and run away. Could it be that a villain finally infiltrated the school? Tamaki asked himself, his social anxiety finally returning as he saw the soon-forming horde of students jam into each other as they made their hurried escape. I dunno. I should check it out, Mirio declared as he ran towards the opposite direction from everyone else, towards the classrooms. What, Mirio? Amajiki hesitated before running after his friend, worried about both the situation at hand and his friend's safety. If there really is a villain, then we have to alert the teachers. Better to be safe than sorry, the boy thought as he ran down the hallway and began his hunt. Minutes earlier, while half of UA was situated within the cafeteria, a large crowd had gathered just outside the front gates. Reporters of various outlets, big and small, gathered around the front entrance in hopes of receiving a stray student or teacher. Or maybe, by some miracle, All Might himself would give them the time of day. Yet only a few feet behind them were two teenagers, both obscured by their hoodies. Izuku Midoriya, wearing his now usual dark green hoodie, followed behind Tamura Shigaraki, who wore a similar black hoodie. Both of them had their faces covered as well, Tamura wearing the same severed hand, while Izuku wore what seemed to be a black bandana over his mouth. Had any of the normal citizens paid them any heed, then they'd easily assume they were villains, but obviousness aside, it was more about masking their identities than anything else. These idiots stand here in the blazing sun for attention. How irritating, Tamura commented as the two boys took a moment to observe. Not one reporter had noticed them standing in the middle of the road just behind them. To be fair, so many popular heroes and young students are gathered inside the most prestigious school around. Anything that has to do with UA would be headline news, so they're probably too fixated on them to pay any attention to their surroundings. Midoriya commented, receiving a glance from the other boy. Quote, ... You're irritating. Stop talking. Right, sorry, he apologized. Inwardly, Izuku felt his stomach crawl as he stood side by side with Tamura, feeling his oddly intimidating presence force panic into his heart. He couldn't shake the feeling of being judged for his every action. Even now he could see a glimpse of his gaze as they stood out in the open, exposed. Today was Izuku's first mission, a practical test so to speak. Originally it was Tamura's idea to cause a commotion at UA, but it was Sensei's orders that brought the both of them together. It was almost crippling how his stomach churned and twisted as he stared at the crowd of people before them, as he came to expect for his first real assignment. It's nothing to worry about, we're just here to destroy the gate. In and out, shouldn't be too hard. He reassured him, further tightening his bandana across his mouth to make absolute sure that his identity wasn't revealed. Despite the purpose of his outfit being to hide his identity, he felt as though he drew in more attention than before with his hood drawn and his face covered. Worse was the fact that he was supposed to be in school at the moment, another layer to stress about. Although he was somewhat certain that his teacher wouldn't notice his absence, he could only hope that the job is finished before his own classes start again. Hey, Shigariki. I think it's about time we start, Midoriya stated, fidgeting as he looked around his surroundings. TCH, don't tell me what to do, Tamura responded as he reluctantly walked into the crowd ahead. The two boys waded through the thick crowd of reporters, making each of them wonder who these two kids in hoodies were. Hey, who are you two? They questioned aloud, but none bothered to reactivate cameras or prod any further. Upon reaching the large metal gate the two stopped and stared ahead, almost like they were biding their time. Kurogiri said that Tamura can take care of the gate himself. I wonder what kind of quirk he has that can do that. Midoriya asked himself as his partner placed one hand on the large doors. Upon Tamura placing all 5 of his fingers onto the solid steel gate, cracks began to form all throughout. In seconds the shiny paint withered away and was replaced by falling gray ash, making the once impenetrable steel doors into large slabs of rock that disappeared with each gust of wind. Without realizing it, the crowd was now facing empty air, nothing stopping them from walking up to the front doors of the legendary school itself. For a silent second of disbelief everyone stared at the black and gray ash pile before them, too shocked to believe what they saw. That was until one man with notepad at hand ran into action, pushing past the two teens, going up to the front doors and impatiently banging against them. With little hesitation afterwards the whole crowd rushed forward, pushing aside the mysterious kids in favor of capitalizing on their opening. That was wow, said Izuku, utterly flabbergasted by the display before him. Numerous questions formed in his mind in an instant, trying to make sense of what he just saw. He was even tempted to pull out his notebook then and there before he snapped back to reality. We need to leave now before the cameras spot us. He sighed with relief, glad that the task was done for. With that the boy turned around and made his way out before noticing that Tamura wasn't actually following him. Rather, he was instead staring at the campus itself. Hey, we have to. Shut up, he remarked. For a little while the boy seemed to blankly stare at the sight ahead of him before doing the unthinkable. Without care or warning the teen stepped forward, taking a slightly better look at the inside of the school. Hey, we can't just walk in or we'll be spotted. Midoriya desperately tried to argue against his partner who lost his sense. We're just here to do the mission. Quiet down or they'll notice us, he said before strolling inside, shocking the green-haired boy. Stunned, Midoriya now staggered for a new course of action, either to follow his orders or to follow Tamura. Kurogiri had told the both of them to leave as soon as they could, but now Tamura was just going right in. This isn't part of the plan. He panicked, looking around to see if anyone had noticed the events. Luckily, there were no wanderers or cars passing by, leaving him completely exposed and out in the open. Thinking quickly he ran after the white-haired boy who only walked at a moderate pace, taking in the sights around him like he was at an amusement park. Tamura, we need to leave before they see us, Midoriya repeated, but to no avail. Then be a good dog and leave. I'll go sightseeing, the boy mocked, further stunning the teen. Just behind him, Midoriya was frozen in place, still arguing within himself. He knew that he had to follow his orders and leave before he was spotted, but he also knew that he couldn't leave Tamura alone. If he were to come back with him missing, then who knows what'll happen afterwards. Of course it was Tamura that was risking himself, but that was beside the point. I can't leave him alone. We were partnered up for a reason. He convinced himself as he strut forward, catching up to the slow-paced teen. So you're sticking around? He asked, irritated. I can't leave without you, we're in this together. Izuku replied defiantly, frustrating the white-haired boy further. As the two bull-headed teens continued their walk, Midoriya took a look around, realizing the position he was in. He was finally within UA's large, looming walls and got to see the school up close and personally for the first time ever. Even if he was breaking the law at the moment, a fragment of childlike wonder returned to his eyes as he witnessed the illustrious school of heroes in all of its shining glory. It's so much bigger than I imagined. I wonder what the inside is like. He wondered, peeking into the glass to see the clean hallways inside. HMPH, then why don't you? Tamura mocked. Without warning, he placed his hand on the window in front of them, destroying it silently and creating a new entrance from within the school. Why would you do that? Midoriya asked. Don't you get it? We're villains, we can do what we want. Tamura taunted further as he continued his stroll. For a while Izuku hesitated, unsure if he should enter. Despite the position he was in, it felt wrong. He wasn't supposed to be here. Sure, he was aware that the operation was illegal, an idea that still hasn't caught up to the young boy yet, but nonetheless it felt like he was forbidden from going inside the school walls. Yet in seeing his partner stroll right in without a care seemed tempting. We're just here to look around. In and out, he repeated in his mind as he took a step forward, breathing the air of the prestigious school. Izuku was quickly mesmerized by the sheer vastness of the school, making the two teens seem meek and small in comparison. The hallways themselves had floors so wide and long that they resembled highway roads. The large oak doors to every classroom doubled in height and width of a normal door. Walking inside the building made Izuku's heart beat just a little bit faster, his mind unable to register how impressive the school looked. Sure, to anyone else, Tamura included, the school seemed rather simple, but to Izuku his long-lost dreams were being fulfilled as they passed through the many empty classrooms. Yet inwardly a reserved sense of distance kept him from gawking and constrained his overwhelming emotions for the sake of the task at hand. He understood that his dreams were long lost, which curbed his sense of joy to that of minor disappointment. TCH, how boring. Tamura complained, having expected more from the school. Maybe a little more flair was what he was looking for. But we can't be spotted, otherwise our cover might get blown. He pleaded once more. The point is to draw attention. And if anyone gets in my way, I'll kill them where they stand. Tamura said coldly, shocking his partner to the core. You can't be serious. I mean, we're only supposed to destroy a gate, that's all. We can't just. Izuku objected before he was interrupted. Why not? Are you afraid of the consequences? Tamura asked, turning to face the innocent boy with a stern look. After all, you're a villain, aren't you? Killing is part of the new role. What's wrong with killing one or two people along the way? It's not that. But we can't be caught on our first mission. Izuku avoided the question. Even if this is just a school, the most powerful hero is just around the corner. And if we're captured here, then we'll ruin all of Master's plans. The two teenagers stared off one another, subtly gauging the other. Yet again Izuku found himself having to prove his loyalty, and yet again he stood his ground. He knew that he couldn't answer Tamura's question, nor did he understand why they've strayed so far from their original mission, but what he did know was that being inside the school was a needless risk, especially if their opening could close at any given moment. In response, the white-haired teen slowly crept up to Izuku and placed a hand on his shoulder, gripping it tightly but making sure to remove his pinky finger. I'm having a real hard time trusting you, Midoriya. You're too noble, too innocent to be working with the likes of us villains. Tamura explained. How can we be sure that you won't sell us out to the heroes that you still admire? What use are you to us? He asked. The menacing shift in tone stopped Midoriya's heart, his eyes staring at the hand that clenched onto his shoulder. With one finger he would turn to ash like the door from before. That alone left Izuku panicking for answers, questioning himself what Shigaraki would like to hear from him. But that was when he realized that he already had his answer, the sole reason why he was here. Time and time again he was tested, and the more he endured the more he grew closer to his goal, his true purpose in life. It was a mere idea, a dream that he wanted to fulfill. Since he was little, all he's ever hoped was to save people, to impact the world as a hero. Yet with Sensei's guidance and his new experiences, he's learned that he can do much more than that. He knows now that great things await him, and it was all thanks to All for One. Standing up straight and returning Tamura's glare with equal intensity, Midoriya began to speak but was interrupted by a new voice that shouted from behind them, saving Midoriya from Shigaraki's grasp. "Stop right there, villains." Only half turning to see the new arrival, Tamura spotted a blonde boy sprinting into the scene, and close behind him was a kid with dark blue hair and pointy ears. He couldn't recognize either of them, but Izuku could. "Crap, this is bad." Izuku panicked as Tamura let go and fully faced the new arrivals. "So the student heroes make an appearance, huh? Well then, by all means, capture us." Tamura taunted, outstretching his hands as if to grab the two before him. However, he was surprised when Midoriya of all people grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back desperately. "The hell are you? We have to run right now," he advised, further pissing off the white-haired boy. "Don't tell me what to do. Please, you don't understand, they're stronger than you realize. They're two of the school's top students, Mirio Tagata and Tamaki Amajiki," he explained, recounting what he's learned online and on the news. Tamaki can shapeshift into anything he's eaten recently, and Mirio can phase through anything by holding his breath. The air between the four only got more and more tense as the stare-down continued. Izuku could only return the glares he received as he hoped as prayed that Shigaraki would back down. Yet the look in his eyes was unreadable. Seconds passed in silence, both parties too tense to move until the students began dashing after the mysterious villains, forcing the two to turn around and run in the direction they came from. But making their escape harder was Tamaki, who used his quirk to conjure an octopus tentacle for an arm and use it to reach Izuku. However, turning around just in time to see the large tentacle, the boy reacted by sidestepping it, causing Tamura to be grabbed instead. Trying to set himself free, Shigaraki attempted to place a hand onto the large tentacle that restrained him, only to be met with a flying fist aimed straight at his face. The punch was able to phase through his severed hand and land on his face without any trouble, dazing him by the sheer force of impact. Thinking quickly, Izuku ran headfirst towards Tamaki and threw a hidden knife after the boy, fully expecting the attack to work as a distraction. As expected, Tamaki used his mutant arm to block the flying blade but was left defenseless as Izuku charged headfirst and jump-kicked him in the chest, knocking him off his feet and freeing Tamura from his grasp. "I'll end this," he yelled as without hesitation he placed two hands onto the ground, causing it to shake violently as cracks formed along the street-like hallway. The effect was almost immediate as Izuku leapt out of the immediate destruction, leaving Tamaki to stumble as the cracks on the floor only grew bigger. In order to avoid taking any damage, Mirio phased through the floor, leaving his clothes on the floor to be swallowed by the earth. Seeing their opportunity, the two villains made another break for the exit, finding the same window panel they'd destroyed and retracing their original steps. Yet the advantage was only brief as the other two boys used their respective powers to pull themselves back up and give chase, Mirio left nude by the encounter. Luckily for the pair of villains, they didn't have to run far as they rounded the corner they came from and disappeared behind the press that they led in. Unfortunately for their pursuers, they were caught off guard by the large crowd of reporters and cameras. "Crap," Mirio panicked, reflexively falling through the ground to cover up his nude appearance, leaving his best friend even more exposed as the cameras turned to face him. "Hey look, it's Tamaki Amajiki, one of the top students of UA. Mr. Amajiki, can we have a word?" Stopping in his tracks, the poor boy could only stutter and freeze in place as the overwhelming feeling of despair and anxiety began choking him out. Further ahead, the two boys were finally able to catch their breath as they created distance between them and the gates of UA. As the two boys huffed tiredly in the middle of the street, Izuku looked back and stared at the school they'd escaped from, his eyes lingering just a bit too long. "It's all for a good cause," he convinced himself, bringing him back to the present moment as he faced his partner in crime. "Hey, Shigaraki, what do you want?" he responded bitterly, holding his hand over his nose in pain. "I have the answer to your question, the one from earlier," Izuku stated, standing up straight and proud for his ally to hear. I know what my use is, and it's to help change the world. With Sensei's help I can make the world a better place for people like me. So because of that, please, allow me to help you in any way I can. For Sensei's sake. ... How arrogant, was his only response, turning away and leaving the boy behind in a confusing manner, but nonetheless telling. If I still need to prove myself to others, then I'll work hard to show my worth. Thought as he closely followed his ally. Proudly, the green-haired teen strolled alongside his upset ally, eager to show his worth however he can, in the present and in the near future. Hours later Izuku returned home from school feeling about as dizzy as usual. Though he left his earlier mission unscathed, he still had his daily blood draining to deal with. It was a wonder that he has yet to receive lasting damage, but his body's ability to hold out has pushed off the consequences for the time being. In the meantime, he had his diet to worry about. I feel like I'm seconds away from becoming anemic, he thought as he leaned against the wall for a brief second. Whether he was running his body to the ground or further harnessing his quirk wasn't his concern for the moment. Instead, he had more important things to worry about. His first mission as a villain went terribly, nearly going off the rails despite its simplicity, and all because of his partner not trusting him enough. And yet, Izuku inwardly smiled at the results. He knew that it went wrong, he knew that it almost did get worse. However, it was the simple achievement of pulling off a successful task for his sensei that made the hardship bearable. And despite the challenge of proving himself further to Tamura, the challenge itself provoked a feeling of needing to improve himself. It was like he was finally living for once, like he was finally achieving his dreams and making his place in the world. Bar the fact that he had to intentionally destroy the gates of his dream school, being able to put what he's learned to practice was a feeling greater than that of being on the moon. ... He had finally found purpose. This won't stop me from helping others, or striving to change the world. Izuku reminded himself as he defiantly reached for a bottle of juice and supplements that he stored in his backpack. It was for that reason why he made sure his body, more importantly his blood, wouldn't fail him, among other things. Ignoring the dizziness, the boy entered his apartment and was greeted by his mother, who waited patiently for his arrival. "How was your day, honey? You're here later than usual." "It was great, thanks Mom. And sorry for being late, I had more things to do again." Izuku replied with a warm smile, making his mother smile as well. "Sweetie, you wouldn't happen to be talking to a girl, would you?" Inko wondered, making Izuku panic and blush at the same time. How did she know? How could she tell? Maybe. He stuttered until he let out one tired sigh. "How could you tell? You've been coming home a little late, but every time you do you have this big smile on your face." She stated matter-of-factly. "If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were flirting when I wasn't looking." As much as Izuku tried to hide his private life, it was easy to forget that his mother was just as observant as he was, even more so really. Nothing passes her gaze without her knowing, and yet with her reserved nature it was easy to forget this aspect of her. "I wouldn't call it flirting, but I have someone to talk to now." Izuku cleared up calmly. "Oh, you made a friend. That's wonderful, I'm so proud of you," she exclaimed, holding her son's face in her hands. She more than anyone knew what an achievement this was for her son. "I'm happy for you. I'd really like to meet your friend one day, if you ever invite them over." "Maybe one day, Mom. Maybe one day." Izuku sighed, knowing that Toga wasn't quite the person he'd want to invite over. "Oh, and before you eat, I have something I'd like to show you," she informed before shuffling away to her room, leaving Izuku confused. In no time the kind-hearted mother walked back into the room with a bag at hand and a smile on her face, further confusing the boy. She gave him a gift. Why? His birthday wasn't for a few months, so why did she have a gift? "Please open it." Confused, Izuku opened the bag and was surprised by what he revealed. In his hands was a lime-green jumpsuit with two large white stripes that rode along the edges of the suit. It also had a hoodie that doubled as a face covering, even featuring two ear-like pieces that stuck out at the head. The green-haired boy was shocked to see his old dream come to life, a hero suit he fantasies about having before ultimately giving up. Part of his childhood he spent drawing his own suit for the future, creating wild and often absurd designs until he landed on a brightly colored jumpsuit, and seeing it in person made it look better than those rough drawings. How did you? I was cleaning your room the other day when I stumbled on one of your old notebooks. I didn't mean to pry, but when I saw the design I thought that maybe you'd still like a hero suit. She confessed. Now holding her son's hands and making direct eye contact with Izuku, the boy could see a small tear form in her eye as she continued speaking. I know that you've stopped trying to be a hero, and I know that I wasn't able to support your dream properly. But now that I'm watching you grow before my eyes, I realized that I should have done more than what I did then. And now that you're focused on improving your body and getting in shape, I wanted to show you that you have my full support. Because I'll always love you, and I don't want to see you hurt anymore. Now fully crying and sobbing, the emotional woman tried desperately to wipe the tears away, but they never stopped and only kept falling in spite of her efforts. Seeing his mom in such a state made Izuku tear up as well, tightly gripping onto the gift that once meant so much to him. It pained his heart to lie, to say that he no longer wanted to be a hero or to be someone that people could rely on. He still slept at night with dreams of him soaring in the sky, or blasting away criminals with cool powers like other people had. His childhood refused to let go of these dreams no matter how much he wanted to set them aside. But he knew that he couldn't forget such an important time of his life. His room still had a poster or two of All Might, and his computer still had All Might's premiere bookmarked onto it. However, he knew that in doing so he'd be going against his new cause. In so little time his life had changed in such a way that the things he once held onto were now things he was supposed to hate, like all villains do. He had to accept it, and yet as he held the suit in his hands and watched his mother bawl her eyes out, he knew in his heart he couldn't abandon those dreams. Even now that his goal had changed, it still was made from the hopes and dreams of that young kid he once was, the one that wanted a better life. "It's okay, Mom. I love it," he reassured as he hugged his mom tightly. It pained him that he held the suit he once wished to have, yet it filled his heart knowing that his mom still cared for him. And as the emotional pair held each other tightly, Izuku Midoriya had become the world's biggest hypocrite. A wannabe hero working under the world's worst villain. Under the cover of blinding darkness, All for One sat in his specialized chair, resting and saving his strength. As he did so, a purple shadow covered by the darkness appeared, teleporting Kurogiri and Tamura and presenting them to their master. "I take it the mission went well, Tamura?" The master of evil prodded to his student, who bowed with respect before speaking. "Yes, master. Chaos was sown at UA. No one was able to identify us." Tamura responded with more care in his words than usual. "Of course, after all, you and Izuku were able to escape unharmed despite the stunt you pulled?" he asked, freezing the boy in place. "My apologies, master. I was out of line. It won't happen again." "It's okay, Tamura. I accepted as much. Which is why I had Kurogiri oversee the whole ordeal with care. Should you and Midoriya have entered real trouble, he would have assisted in your escape." All for One explained, somewhat angering the teen. "More importantly, I suppose you and him were able to settle any doubts between the two of you." With the pairing that All for One had made, he expected there would be conflict between the two. Both of his students were quite the contrast. Despite their relatively similar backgrounds, the two had completely different outlooks on life and their society, so it was bound to happen. If anything, Midoriya reminded All for One of his little brother, so hopeful and eager to make the world a better place. Tamura, on the other hand, was more similar to himself, a man who wanted to tear down the world and its heroes. Two siblings who lived the same lives yet had opposing views on the world. It was tragic the way things fell apart between them, his brother's undying defiance embodying the very power that coursed through All Might's veins. That was a mistake that he wasn't going to repeat. Instead, he would go to lengths to make sure that the next incarnations of he and his brother won't go astray. And it starts with Izuku. With all due respect, I can't see what you see in that kid. So naive and inexperienced, and so quick to show his worth yet not willing to go all the way. Tamura complained, referring to his earlier unwillingness to infiltrate the school. "That is because Midoriya has different views than you do, Tamura." All for One explained. "Given time you will see his worth, and you'll grow to appreciate it too. For now, warm up to him, for he's still new to our cause. What of the next taskmaster? You said it would come soon. Tamura wondered, trying to change the subject. The day after the attack came with much debate within the school and world around it. News reports claimed that villains broke in and released the press at the doors of UA, and others say that a seismic event destroyed a small part of the school. In both cases the principal was able to ease the tension of the public and the students, informing that no students were harmed and no lasting damage was made. This was only one of many future concerns regarding the school, yet the work never ceased as classes were held the next day. Class 1A itself was hosting a very important event within its classroom. As such, Momo Yaoyorozu is your new class president, with Tenya Iida as vice president. Aizawa explained in his usual monotone voice. As such, the two of them will represent your class. If there are any objections, then say them now before the votes are settled. Brief silence overtook the class, with very little objection to the new arrangements. It was by popular vote, after all, in which the two were established as the class reps, and with both their collective efforts the other day to quell the crowd, popular opinion was nothing to be worried about. Save for one student. I still say I should be class rep, Bakugo declared arrogantly, kicking up his feet. I'm the best of the class and there's no argument. There's very little value in power when it comes to leadership, Bakugo. Simply being the strongest isn't going to guide the rest of the students. Yaoyorozu lectured, but was hastily ignored. Yeah, but if both of our class reps are stuck-up rich kids, then what does that say about the rest of us? He stated matter-of-factly, angering the rest of the class. Stuck up? They questioned, a wave of anger consuming the entire class as the boy felt several glares his way. If it were me, I'd say that the one to represent the class should be the strongest around. To tell off anyone and set us as the best of the best. Yeah, but Todoroki isn't really leader material, commented someone in the crowd, instantly angering Bakugo to an incredible degree. You bitch, who said that? But with his response the class didn't stay quiet as Mina Ishido jerked from her seat. You can't make stupid claims without backing them up, Bakugo. And this isn't even about you to begin with. She argued strongly, followed by Denki Kaminari, who also stood from his seat. Yeah, we're talking about real leaders here. You only think for yourself and no one else. Tenya and Yaoyorozu are more than capable of fulfilling their roles as leaders for their ability to quell the chaotic crowd yesterday. The Dark Crow Tokiyami commented spitefully. You on the other hand have done nothing but antagonize us since classes started. With the stiff resistance he received, Bakugo could only scowl at the class. Why the hell did they doubt him so much? The only thing that matters about representation was strength, and to have two weaklings as the heads of 1A was more than a mistake. The class would become a laughingstock among the other classes and schools as well. Both of them don't even deserve to be here, they're just rich brats who flunked their way in. He thought as his fist slammed against his table. I'm the strongest in this class and that's all that matters. If that's too hard for any of you to realize, then you're all stupid. He declared defiantly, doubling down on his claims despite how hated they are. No, you're not, stated Todoroki, making the blonde snap in his direction. What did you say? You're not the strongest of us all. I am, he claimed boldly, his face not giving away an ounce of arrogance or ego, his body sitting as still as ice. Now fuming with anger, Bakugo gripped his desk, veins popping from his arms, neck and forehead as he stared at someone with such audacity to say something so bold without a second thought. Oh yeah, then why don't you prove it? He threatened, making the other boy scowl. If I must, then I will. He returned the threat. Just as the tension in the class skyrocketed, a vicious slam of a fist into wood redirected everyone's attention back to their teacher, whose eyes glowed red and his scarf floated slightly. He gritted his teeth with clear frustration and annoyance strung across his stern face as he stared the two boys down. That's enough, both of you, Aizawa stated in a more threatening tone, yet also with authority. Tense silence followed as Bakugo attempted to stare back at his teacher, yet failing to match the same level of command or viciousness. Without any option, the teenager slumped back into his desk and crossed his arms, now ignoring the rest of the class. With that out of the way, Aizawa continued, returning to his monotone and empty nature. Class is dismissed for the day. Quote dot dot dot. But the bell hasn't rung yet. The class leaves when I say so. Now leave, he restated, both confusing and surprising the rest of the class. Without much more incentive, the whole class collectively got up from their seats and walked away, leaving the stubborn Bakugo to huff in his silence. Eventually the boy followed with, still pissed by what happened. Yet as he exited the door he was stopped by none other than the teacher. Bakugo, a word, he commanded, forcing the boy to stop in his tracks. But he remained standing at the door, back facing the pro-hero as he continued. Sooner or later you'll realize that being a hero isn't all about strength, and the sooner you do the easier my class and the rest of your career will be. Until then, expect to be disappointed. Dismissed. With that the boy left the room, cursing under his breath as the bell finally rang, releasing the whole school. Once the school bells rang all across the city, students were freed at last. However, not all of them took to leaving immediately, as people like Izuku Midoriya lingered for just a bit longer. As per usual he met up with Toga once again, and like clockwork he had his blood drained by the cute yet suspicious girl. It was normal for him by now to be sitting in the dark shade while his life force left him bit by bit. But luckily for him, things weren't as strange or awkward as the first time around. How was school? Toga asked kindly, making the boy sigh a little. Fine I guess, but I had a tough time with a few boys in my class. Thanks for asking. Really, if you want I can stab them for you. They won't even know what hit him. She offered, but was waved away. Please don't kill them, they don't deserve it. He restated, but Toga was not undeterred. Just say the word, the cops won't know. No thanks, he repeated. The soft buzzing of his head muddled his thoughts and the dizziness got a little worse as he had to hold his head in place for a little while. Seeing as Izuku was now visibly disturbed, Toga made an effort to change the topic. Quote dot dot dot. What do they call you? She asked. Quote dot dot dot. What names do the others call you? She asked again, somewhat confusing him. Why, I just wanna know, she replied, smiling a little less than she normally did. It was a rather roundabout way of asking things, but Izuku answered regardless. Well, I guess some of the more popular nicknames are Useless, Reject, or Deku. He recounted, but the last one confused the girl. Deku, what does that mean? She asked. It means useless, in kanji I think. My ex-friend once gave me the name since it sounds similar to my actual name. Ever since it stuck around even after he left. He recounted the tale before rounding back to his original question. But why do you want to know what they call me? An awkward pause later and Toga shifted her eyes, making things even more uncomfortable between them for no known reason. It was like the topic was rather sensitive for Toga more than it was for Izuku. That was until her expression softened, making her seem more vulnerable than he's ever seen her. When I was in school I was called a lot of names too. Some called me creepy, others called me evil, but the most popular one of them all was crazy. She informed, surprising Izuku. Everyone had an ugly name for me, so it's good to know I'm not the only one that gets called mean things. Sorry that happened to you. Izuku apologized, making her chuckle in response. Don't be. Now I'm free to do what I want. And that includes drinking blood. She spoke proudly, forcing an uneasy chuckle from the boy. Still, thanks again for being here. Your blood helps my urges a lot. No problem. No really, thank you. She restated, more seriously this time. In response Izuku smiled again, tiredly but as genuinely he could. You're welcome. To that Himeko was grinning from ear to ear, blushing and giggling like the schoolgirl she appeared to be. In the same instance she stored the now full pack of blood in her backpack. Hey, by the way, can I get your phone number? She asked suddenly as she sprung to her feet, surprising him. My phone number? Yeah, I mean you have a phone don't you? She questioned. Midoriya was stunned and temporarily unable to react, at least until he finally shook himself out of this state and slowly pulled himself from the floor. Why yeah, I do. With an awkward feeling in his stomach the two traded contact info, and with little hesitation Toga called her new number to make sure she had the right number. Sure enough the green smartphone in the boy's hands let her know that everything was successful. Heh, now I have your number. Why don't we get together sometime? She asked, being way too forward for Izuku to handle as he stumbled over his words like never before. Sure, maybe next week, he suggested with a red face and a hot chest, making Toga blush too. Ooh, next week, I can't wait, she exclaimed as she happily skipped away, leaving Izuku too stunned and dizzy to say anything else. Though unexpectedly, his knee gave out as he temporarily lost all sensation in his legs, causing him to fall over rather painfully. His heart beat more than usual, and not for the reasons one might think. Crap, he thought as he temporarily lost consciousness. Again within the school of Ua, the empty halls created a unique silence within the building, lifelessness within the school that was normally teeming with life. Very few people stayed after school, primarily the teachers and staff. But aside from them, there was also another student who remained. Mirio Tagata sat alone in the wide and empty lobby of the school, which was a large room full of chairs and tables for any who want to study on their own. In the emptiness, Mirio was able to think more clearly, but even then he wasn't able to run into any solutions. Maybe if I show them how strong I am, then they'll listen to me better, he thought. But wait, if I just go up and beat them senseless, then some of them might give up. It's no fair for someone so strong to crush newcomers like that, it'll scare them off. He worried as well. A drowning wave of doubt cast over Mirio as he racked his brain for better ideas, yet came up empty every time. How can he make the perfect impression? How can he be just like All Might? How is he supposed to compete with All Might? The challenge he faced was grand and almost disheartening, almost. As he sat alone in the empty hall of the school, he received a text from All Might of all people, which surprised him. Go to my office, it said, and with that he left his seat and made his way to the office. Walking through the nearly abandoned hallways of the school felt so unbelievably unnatural to Mirio. A place that was usually full of life was now empty. He could hear the squeaking of his shoes as he walked through the abnormally wide hallway. Peering into the outside, he saw much of the same thing. Not a single soul to be seen. The light of the sun revealed the empty courtyard of the school, and even the neighboring houses were still. Luckily they weren't exactly lifeless, as even the distant city radiated activity and energy, otherwise Mirio would be more than worried. Entering the office of the great All Might, the teen found the large man sitting at his desk, filing a mountain of paperwork that nearly reached his head. It was baffling how much work All Might seemed to have, and that was likely just from school. Ah, young Tagata, here, have a seat. We need to talk, he stated as he pulled away from his work and rolled out another chair in front of him. Once Mirio sat down, he noticed All Might's unusually serious face, even seeing his smile falter slightly. Did you need something, teach? Mirio asked, trying his best to seem unbothered. Nothing at all, young Tagata. If anything, I hear you need something from me, he responded, making Mirio's demeanor fall as well. Yeah, he sighed. It's about this whole leadership thing. I know that I'm supposed to learn how to be a leader for Class 1A, but I still can't think of how to make my first impression, or how to lead them like you do, he confessed. I see, that's a tricky problem, one that I'm sure you can solve. All Might reassured him, but as your mentor I must tell you that this will be your first time becoming a leader to others. There's no need to be stressed. I know, but I just don't get what to do or how to do it, especially like you do, All Might, he added. All right, my mistake. All Might apologized. If it's advice you want, then I'll tell you. The most important part about being a leader is confidence, he informed as the boy perked up. From what Night Eye has taught you, a leader must be calm and confident in any situation, that way the citizens will rest assured knowing that you as a hero are more than capable of protecting them. The last part about the jokes isn't required, however, but I suggest following Night Eye's orders regardless. Oh right, that makes sense. Thanks, Mirio thanked, though looking down on the floor he couldn't help but feel like he just relearned something he already knew. Right, confidence, he thought, but was interrupted by a hand falling into his shoulder. Listen, I know that I haven't been much of a teacher as of late. With my duties to the city and to my students, I haven't made any time for my most important pupil, and I hope you can forgive me for my neglect. The great man apologized, going as far as to bow for forgiveness. Oh, well, thanks, Mirio smiled, felling the heartfelt apology. He surely didn't expect it, but it was nice nonetheless. And another thing, as my pupil I should tell you that I myself am new to being a teacher as well. He confessed, shocking Mirio a little. Was he really going this far to apologize? Not only have I started teaching at UA this year, but I have no experience in teaching others on my own. Instead I rely on what my masters before me have taught, yet I'm afraid that isn't enough to suit your needs, young Tagata. He informed, now standing from his chair and walking towards the glass to peer into the large city in front of him. I must train you to become not only equal to the symbol I've made for the world, but better. And that starts with you, young Tagata. Now fully facing Mirio, he continued with even more seriousness. Tomorrow all of Class 1A will be expecting me to guide them through the unforeseen simulation joint alongside Mrs. 13 and Mr. Aizawa. Instead, I want you to fill my role. What? Are you sure about this? Shouldn't I start small or something? Mirio asked both himself and his teacher in confusion and surprise. If you want to grow, then I must start by throwing you into the action, not having you sit around and wait. He lectured both himself and his student. Since you've taken classes at the USJ countless times before, you can better help the newcomers and introduce yourself properly. I won't always have you replace me on special times like these, but for now you will. Freezing in place, Mirio felt the worry and doubt that he's felt in the past days return tenfold, overwhelmed by the heavy assignment. Sure, he had to show his face sometime, but to replace All Might. Isn't that setting him up for failure? No matter what way you spin this, at least one person won't take him seriously. But instead he calmed himself and stared directly at the challenge ahead. His heart told him no, but his mind knew that he had to find a way to lead. Despite the crushing doubts and high expectations that were set, Mirio forced himself to stand and accept the challenge despite how difficult it was. Leading a class of teenagers that were a few years younger than him while also replacing the #1 hero as their teacher. All right, I'll do my best, Mirio stated almost against his will in a way. But as the up-and-coming symbol of peace he couldn't back down, not for anything. That's great, young Tagata. I'm glad you're excited, he said before getting a little more serious. And as such I must tell you, as your mentor and the #1 hero. But instead of an immediate response, Mirio received an awkward silence, confusing the boy as he looked at All Might's stone-cold expression. Yeah, what is it? That I'm here, for you. Every step of the way. And if you need anything else, contact me directly, he stated, smiling brightly whilst holding a thumbs up. Right, thank you, All Might. Mirio thanked as he made his way out. And remember to go plus ultra, he heard as he left the room and closed the door behind him, leaving him alone once again. Although that last pause felt a little weird, Mirio thought nothing of it as he made his way through the building, finally deciding to go home after all of his hard work. He could feel the nervousness eat at him as he looked out at the world that was soon his to protect, his to lead and guide. For now it was a classroom, but eventually, it would become the world as he knew it and more. Baby steps, Mirio. Baby steps. Behind him, with the cover of the shut door, All Might sighed to himself, standing proud and tall. That was at least until he felt the trickle of a metal-tasting liquid fall from his chin. Without anything stopping him, a cloud of smoke enveloped him and he was soon back in his original form, without any energy. I have to tell him. One day, he told himself, clutching his chest and looking out towards the city once more. Hours after school had ended, the angry Bakugo sat in bed contemplating a new way of venting his frustrations. He'd already jogged 2 miles away and back, but his boiling anger remained even as his body collapsed onto his bed. He contemplated picking up a book, playing a video game or messing with his drum set, but none seemed interesting to him anymore. It was times like these that he wished he still had that beachside to train in, a place to go full throttle without anyone saying otherwise, as well as further his efforts into becoming #1. Sadly this wasn't the case, and as his body recovered his thoughts reminded him of his earlier embarrassment. His anger returned to him nearly twice as fiercely as before, and his clenched fists were close to drawing blood. Those dumbasses don't know what real strength is, he thought, a forehead vein close to popping. If they did, then they'd think twice about telling me off. The insult that resonated with him was less about his lack of leadership qualities and more in his apparent lack of respect. Everyone had gone as far as to call him weaker than that damn icy boy. And even that bastard himself had the utter gall to call himself the strongest in the class. Something so incredibly demeaning just wouldn't stand, not if he had anything to say about it. "I'm going on another run," he told himself, forcing himself from the comfort of his bed and strutting to the front door. On his way he encountered his mom, who was busy doing laundry. "Where do you think you're going?" she demanded to know, yet Bakugo didn't stop moving. "Going for a run, you old hag. Get off my case. You better if you're gonna stop that incident of yours from happening again," she said before Katsuki slammed the door on his way out. "Like I'd ever let that happen," he told himself, his spark of rage enticing him to start sprinting away from his house and at the direction he normally went. The teen could no longer stand his own anger as sparks popped from the palms of his hands. For a good while he was able to ignore the pain his body endured, his huffing and puffing doing nothing to stop him from running at full speed down the sidewalk. At least that was until his throat closed up on its own, drying up to a point that it sealed itself shut. Almost by force Bakugo stopped in his tracks as he coughed painfully, wheezing out of breath. He bent over his knees shaking by the exertion he's made, using up energy that he didn't have took a powerful toll as the boy tried desperately to stay on his feet. Yet in his sorry state his anger multiplied to such a degree that he yelled to the sky and used his quirk to shoot a powerful explosion in defiance. He needed to do something, anything to prove his strength to those that doubted him. He wanted to show everyone just how wrong they were, starting with Todoroki. "Just cause his rich dad is the number 2 hero doesn't mean he gets to talk down to me," he said as he continued to jog, not caring that his body begged him not to. To think that the son of the flame hero was a better ice caster was laughable, yet that made things all the more insulting. If he didn't know any better he'd say that Todoroki's only quirk was ice, but it was all too obvious that he had the same powers as his father. And yet to think that he could claim to be the strongest in the class while actively shooting himself in the foot filled Bakugo with such a unique type of rage that he couldn't stand it. The utter hypocrisy of the flame hero's son taking his place as the top student while only using his ice powers was simply unbelievable. For now he had to wait for his next opportunity, one in which he could expose Todoroki for who he really was, an arrogant prick. And it would come in the form of the class's trip to the USJ. "I'll show him that I'm the real number 1. There's not a snowball's chance in hell that he's getting away with that. Not while I'm still standing," he told himself whilst still jogging. His body trembled and his heart raced, motivating him to go further and further. Elsewhere, Izuku cleaned his room after getting home from school. Luckily for him Kurogiri had his back, lecturing him yet again about the strain of his body, but like always Izuku waved away the concerns with a fuzzy mind. In recent days he's been unable to participate in training like he normally does, instead staying home as headaches overcame him again and again. With some help he's been able to keep the pain at bay using painkillers and such, and he's had to make up his lost time by researching certain fighting styles and moves on his computer, but unable to put anything to practice. So to distract himself from his current uselessness he decided to clean his room thoroughly, emptying out trash, removing dust and most importantly, taking down all of his All Might merch. It was a long time coming, and while he still couldn't bring himself to throw it all away he would rather store it all in his closet, out of sight. In the end Izuku still couldn't make heads or tails of his standing. On the one hand he could never hope to remove his feelings for heroes, yet he knew far too much for his own good. The society he lived in wasn't safe, and none of that was more evident than in the life he lived and the lives people like Toga or Dabi lived. Heroes weren't able to save them from themselves and other people, a tragedy that deeply troubled the boy. Yet as he sat in bed with an action figure at hand he couldn't help but wonder if his feelings would ever change. His heart and mind were almost always against each other as one told him to put it all past him while the other told him to hold on to those dreams for they were what drove him to begin with. It was like a game of tug of war really, some days it was his heart and other days his mind that were winning, but neither truly gave in. As he stared at the toy in his hand a sound caught his attention, a single ding coming from his smartphone. Setting down the toy beside him, he checked it and realized that Toga had finally sent him a text. "Hey, read the message," which came attached with a cute sticker of a waving animal. Now shifting his attention, he responded with, "Hey," as well. "This is exciting. Read another text. I finally got a boy's number." As he read, he could imagine Toga's excited voice and her warm smile in his head, making him smile too, like he was succeeding in what he sought to do. "How are you doing?" he asked her, exploring. She responded, "Guess she doesn't have anything else to do," he thought to himself, not expecting any answer in particular. "Hey," came another message, "what kind of chips do you like?" "Why are you asking?" "Because I want to buy a gift for my new friend," she responded, making Izuku blush as he typed out his own response. "Thank you. I like anything really," he texted, only to receive the image of a frowny face, clearly due to his vagueness. "How's the blood I gave you?" he asked to shift the conversation. "It's really good. I still have more than half of the bag left," she said, adding a picture of the blood bag in her hands. From the angle of the image, the bag looked more like a strangely shaped cup complete with a bendy straw. "That's good to hear. I'm glad you're enjoying it. And you, did your head stop hurting?" she added as well, taking Izuku aback a little. "It did a little, thanks for asking," he replied. He didn't want to tell her that it was because of the constant blood drawing that he was getting sick, but it was getting much harder to hide now. The headaches and lack of energy kept him at home most of the time, and even Toga started to take notice. Whether she knew the true cause of this wasn't really clear to him, but it was clear that every day Izuku would get strange dizzy spells. Suddenly he received a picture, a selfie of Toga smiling and making the peace sign. He was almost mesmerized by how pretty she looked, smiling happily at the camera, almost making him forget who she was as he stared at the picture of the innocent girl. "Make that my contact on your phone," she demanded soon after, though he hesitated in responding back. "Okay, I'll do that," he responded. Soon after he received another message, this time another demand. "Now send me your picture." "Why?" he asked. "To make your profile too silly." Now taken aback, Midoriya searched his own photos for a suitable image of himself. But halfway into searching he realized that he had no photos of himself, his gallery consisting of images of news reports, heroes in action and other things that he's forgotten to delete over time. For a moment he couldn't believe that he had no photos of himself, but that was until he stumbled upon an image of himself, only much younger and wearing an All Might hoodie. "Yeah, I'd rather not," he thought to himself, cringing at the idea of sending the image. With no other choice he held the camera high over his head and smiled, snapping a picture of himself for Toga's use. Though soon after he sent it he got another text. "Is that an All Might doll?" she asked, shocking him as he flipped to see the doll he left laying right beside him. "Yes," he admitted, feeling his face flush as he responded. For a good while he felt his whole body tighten in embarrassment, having exposed himself without realizing it. "It's pretty cute. I didn't know you were into that." "Cute," he read out loud, almost shocked to see the phrase. "Thanks, I had it since I was a kid," he said further, making him smile as he typed. "Maybe I should give you more All Might merch instead of some chips." "Please, you don't have to," he responded. "But I want to," she said, clearly not backing down. It was almost flattering to Izuku that she was adamant about giving him something in return. It made him feel special. "I'll text to you later with your gift." She ended the conversation, leaving Izuku to lay in his bed alone. Very quickly Izuku's heart pounded as the realization of his achievement dawned on him, like a realization that should have came immediately and not after everything was said and done. "I just texted a girl," he thought, raising his fist into the air in victory of his achievement. But now left with nothing to do, Izuku sat up in bed and held the toy again, back to staring at the bright blue and yellow figure in his hands with an open mind and heart. "Maybe I can keep this," he thought as he placed it on his desk again, returning it to its rightful place. Finally, as night crept through the world, the evilest soul continued to scheme his next plan. As All for One sat at his throne, there was the same TV screen in front of him with the same individual, the scientist that made things happen. "The All Might Killer is ready for deployment, Master," primed and ready for Tamura's command. And what of the men? We've managed to gather a number of petty criminals under our ranks, all of which expecting a hefty sum of money. But after our operation I'm more than certain that none of them will last, at least if the class of 1A are to be estimated accordingly. The man in the TV informed. Good, then we're ready for Tamura and Midoriya's operation tomorrow. All for one stated with a grin. If I may ask, Master. You may. Is there a reason why you expect this operation to fail? I've designed the Nomu to rival the power of All Might himself, surely that is worth more than a mere trial run. Well, it's simple. All Might is too strong of a person to be brought down by a mere tool of ours. This is a mission solely for Tamura and Midoriya to learn from, by facing their greatest enemies. So this is just training then. Why go to such lengths if you know they'll fail? Because growth in failure is greater than growth in success. If either of them are to learn, then it's by learning from their mistakes and growing past them. He informed rather matter-of-factly. I am aware that Midoriya is capable of this much, but Tamura especially is capable of adapting, he only needs time and drive. And should Tamura manage to kill my greatest adversary, all the better, I suppose. I see. Your plan is foolproof then, Master. The scientist stated. Of course, if we want our greatest assets to grow, then we must throw them at the heart of the fire. The morning of the new assignment came with a flurry of emotions for Izuku, who hardly slept after he received the notification last night. A new mission, with Tamura and Kurogiri, he could hardly believe it. And with so little information to go off on, his mind never rested as it imagined countless scenarios in his head, all in varying degrees of intensity. He counted down every minute that passed and even spent some time reviewing his fighting skills in silence. But finally the time was here, jumping out of bed the second his alarm rang. Quickly Izuku left to prepare himself in the restroom, and when he returned he was ready to prepare his things. He changed into his school outfit and emptied his backpack, storing the contents of his bag throughout his room to seem less suspicious. And then came the time to fill it. Immediately he knew of a few things to add, a few pieces of protective gear he kept stored, a gas mask, a harness and 2 knives. For a moment he hesitated as he held the knives in his hands, further imagining what may or may not happen should he use them. But in the end he threw them in the backpack regardless. Finally came the last step, his mission outfit. He struggled to come up with the proper attire to take as his mind couldn't settle on any one outfit. Wearing a simple t-shirt was simply out of the question, and while wearing one of his hoodies had its benefits, it wasn't really practical in a fight. But as he rummaged through his closet he touched upon a somewhat unexpected find, his mint green hero outfit that his mom made for him. Though he almost immediately disregarded the idea, the more he rummaged the more he found himself reconsidering. The outfit was designed for combat after all, even equipped with a mask of sorts that can work in conjunction with his gas mask. But the downside was, well, it was what it stood for. It would be disingenuous to wear his hero outfit for his villain mission, it was seen even with the bright green colors. Not that bright colors were exclusive to heroes, but for a mission that may even require stealth it wasn't quite suited for that. Still, the more he looked at it the more he realized that it was almost perfect for this moment, the latex wouldn't even interfere with the harness that stored his knives. In the end he folded the material and placed it inside his backpack, unable to make a proper excuse to not use it, especially when he didn't have much else to wear. I should put it to good use at least once, he thought as he zipped the backpack and made his way out of his room, ready to truly start his day. It wasn't until later that Izuku appeared inside of the hideout once more, still wearing his school uniform and with his backpack on. The second he left home he was taken to the hideout for briefing. Master will be ready to see you in Tamura shortly. In the meantime I suggest you change before then, Kurogiri advised as he disappeared once more, leaving Izuku all alone. With much nervousness the boy entered a room off the side of the bar, and when he eventually exited he had finally donned his battle gear, his villain suit. The boy wore his mint green suit with minor unease, looking around to see absolutely no one again. Alongside the suit he wore black knee pads and elbow pads along with his usual bright red shoes. Beside that his customized, opaque gas mask hung over his neck, and he wore a bright red belt with pockets that contained painkillers and adrenaline pills, just in case. But most important was the harness he wore. The black-colored harness was thin and made up of simple straps of leather, featuring knife holsters that held 2 combat knives at his sides. Walking out of the room, the boy could feel a strange energy as he strolled around in his battle suit, feeling akin to a vigilante having put on his costume. Just not a hero. Finally Midoriya was able to breathe and fully immerse himself in the moment, the calm before the storm. The tight fabric felt so cold and alien over his body, making him feel both exposed and completely covered in a strange way. The rubber gloves were also a little rough on his hands, and he was fully conscious of the sharp knives he had stored. While wearing the full suit he felt powerful, like a different person. It wasn't the make or the material that changed him, if not the aura it gave off, like he was finally capable for once. Capable of what? He didn't quite know, but it was also that which scared him. This feels weird, he thought as he gripped his gloved hand. He didn't really know how much a costume could change him, and yet here he was. Eventually came Kurogiri once more, this time with Tamura in tow. Unlike Izuku, Tamura wore his usual black shirt, black pants and bright red shoes to battle along with the severed hands he wore over him. Yet with one glance the boy nearly bursted out laughing as he looked at his ally. "Really? You're wearing that to our mission? Don't make me laugh." Tamura laughed as he pointed at Izuku. Hey, it's effective," Izuku retaliated, though even he blushed in embarrassment. Maybe he could have done without the bright green colors. "Yeah, and you look like a wad of gum. Better off with all black like me." He laughed, only to receive a harsh word from Kurogiri. "I'm sorry to say, young Shigaraki, but I don't see you having the proper attire either," he said, making Tamura stop almost immediately. "I'm certain that dress code has little to do with the results of your mission, my students," came a familiar voice from a TV set against a wall. Sure enough, everyone turned to see the TV displaying All for One in his hideout. Unfortunately, or rather conveniently, the screen only revealed blackness on the feed, as his warehouse was known to be kept in the dark most of the time. "Master," the 2 teens exclaimed as they walked over to the video screen and bowed in respect. "I see you're both ready for your new mission, one in which you'll be set with an important task to our cause." All for One continued. "The 3 of you will be attacking the school of UA during a training exercise, most specifically inside of their unforeseen simulation joint. The participants are the class of 1A, their teacher, the Hero 13 and All Might himself." "We're attacking All Might directly, Master," Tamura exclaimed. "The 3 of us alone would be destroyed in an instant." "No need to worry, young Shigaraki. You see, for this mission I've given you 2 very powerful assets, one of which is a Nomu that rivals the power of All Might." "What?" the 2 boys exclaimed, though it was Tamura who replied again. "Master, you're giving me such a powerful weapon to command." "Of course. The Nomu will respond to your word only, Tamura, so guide him well. I task you with killing All Might. But should you fail," he laughed, "there is no penalty." "What's a Nomu?" Izuku asked himself, all too curious. Though at hearing what it was capable of he nearly shuddered. Able to face All Might. They had to fight All Might. As for the other asset, I've contracted a small army of thugs and bandits. They know their assignment, but I expect none of them to remain once you finish." "Master, you hired killers for this mission?" Izuku asked. "Of course, though none of which are as capable as the 3 of you. If anything, they should drop like flies when facing the class of 1A." All for One restated, although that didn't quite help the boy. He knew all too well what his line of work would bring him, yet to be using criminals to his benefit, it just didn't sit right with him. He was finally having to cross a line that he was expected to cross, but that didn't make it any better. "Why do you ask, young Midoriya? Do you have any objections?" There was a tense hesitation from Izuku as he tried to formulate a proper response, yet for a brief second he couldn't remove the awful feeling in his stomach. It was like out of nowhere he was blindsided by the most obvious realization he could have made. He was a criminal now. A villain. But we won't be there to kill anyone, will we? I mean, the class can handle some street thugs and All Might. He's All Might. He can't die, but he's supposed to. Well, are there any objections, Izuku? Said the screen once more. Quote. "None at all. Sorry for taking so long." The boy said, almost sighing to himself. So if we're not there to kill All Might, then why are we trying to kill a group of kids? Asked Tamura. That is simple. In order to truly begin our plans, we must make ourselves known to the world, for the world to recognize the threat we display to their delicate society. All for One boasted with enthusiasm. This mission isn't meant to kill All Might nor the students of UA, but to have them know fear. It is to shake the foundations of this world as the best hero of them all is challenged by a mere tool of our command. And should All Might die here, then all the better, I suppose. It was scary just how far All for One had planned ahead, how much he considered and how he was able to manipulate future events. With recent news of the break-in at the school, the media was now questioning the safety of the hero school. And with this new attack, the fire under the heroes would spread further as word of All Might and the students of UA nearly dying to mysterious villains would tear a hole in hero society. He really did think far ahead. Things can finally shift in our favor. People will finally start to doubt heroes. Izuku thought to himself, both relieved that he didn't have to kill anyone yet stressed that this was such an important operation. I see. I apologize for ever doubting your work, master. Tamura apologized wholeheartedly. That's all right, Tamura. All for One accepted. Now then, Kurogiri will tell you when the mission shall begin and teleport you into action. In the meantime, prepare yourselves. After the final statement, the TV feed was shut off, leaving the screen darker than it was before. Now uneasy and even more nervous than before, Izuku took a seat at the bar, with Tamura sitting down in the couch. I'm going to be fighting Class 1A. The heroes. And I'll be fighting Kachin. He realized, which brought a small headache as a side effect. Luckily it wasn't very painful, though the headache only spelled trouble for him. Hey Midoriya, said Tamura, whom was now giving the boy a judgmental side-eye. You better not chicken out here just cause we're gonna fight heroes, and you better not disappoint. Right, and good luck. The green-haired boy responded as he melted into his seat, counting down the passing minutes once more. Elsewhere just outside of the school of UA stood the students of 1A, all of which wore their hero costumes blissfully unaware of the hardship soon to come. But for the while the students waited patiently for the arrival of the bus, some more than others anyway. When's the damn bus getting here? Thought Bakugo, who was the least patient of the bunch. In fact, he was anxious to get to his destination as soon as possible in order to prove himself to the rest of the class. He'd planned on this since the day before and got so anxious that he hardly slept. Ever since his outburst from yesterday, Katsuki has been all the more eager to display his strength to the rest. And although he received countless glares and glances from the rest of the students, he would not let it deter him from his goals. But contrary to the rest of the class, Kirishima was the only one in close to friendly terms with the boy as he approached him. Yo Bakugo, you excited for training today? He asked with an enthusiastic energy radiating in his voice. The hell do you want now, weird hair? Bakugo demanded to know. I thought you'd leave me alone by now. All right, first of all, my hair isn't even that different from yours. He retaliated. And second, you're kinda the only other person that really gets me. No. I just thought we were friends now. Just 'cause I let you sit with me at lunch doesn't mean you're my friend, dumbass. Well, why not? Plus you look like you need someone to keep you in line after the stunt you pulled yesterday. Say that again. I dare you. Bakugo yelled, ready to start a fight as soon as Kirishima says anything in return. But just like before, the red-haired boy stood firm as he stared down Bakugo, more than capable of saying his piece. I'm not here to start a fight with you, but if that's what it takes to earn your trust, then fine by me. The boy said as he readied a fighting stance, catching the attention of everyone around. If either of you throw a punch, you'll be benched from training for the day. Intervened the arriving voice of Aizawa, who was not having any fighting on his watch. Both boys took a step back and abandoned their fighting positions, though while Bakugo was visibly pissed at Kirishima, the latter only smirked as he glared in return. Without delay, the class organized itself in front of the teacher as they listened to his instructions. I'm glad you're all here today. I should start by informing you all that All Might will not be able to attend today's training, and has sent a suitable substitute. Doesn't matter to me, I can show off whether he's here or not. Bakugo thought. So then who will be our substitute? asked Aoyama. That'd be me. Hey everyone, said a voice from behind the class. Behind the students was another student, one of the most popular ones around. Mirio Tagata, or Lemillion, is one of the top 3 students of the school. His name has spread far from the confines of the school, and he's even appeared on camera once or twice, including the day of the incident with the press. So that's the top student of UA. Bakugo thought as he closely observed the confidence and energy the hero in training boasted as he made his way to the front of the class. He's my next obstacle. Yo, glad I finally get to meet you guys. I'm Mirio Tagata, and I'm filling in for All Might today. The teen introduced himself, to mixed reception. Mr. Tagata here has already been at the USJ and can help you get used to the joint, so you may go to him for any questions you might have. Mr. Aizawa declared, and already he was met with a few raised hands. Yes, are you really the best of the big 3? I can't say for sure, but I'm quite strong on my own. He dodged the question. Are you really the Sir Night Eyes student? Yep, and he's just as fun as you'd think. He joked. I saw you on TV the other day. You looked great. Thanks, I hope they got my good side. Mirio winked. That's enough questions for now. Aizawa reined in the conversation, trying not to waste time on things that aren't on topic. And hey, I'm glad I get to be your teacher-in-law for today. I can't wait to see what Class 1A has in store for us this year. Mirio said, smiling enthusiastically. With that, the overall mood of the class shifted more positively as the bus for the USJ arrived. While not everyone had forgotten the loss of All Might as their teacher, the arrival of the best student of their school proved to be quite a game changer for the class. And none was more impacted by this development than Bakugo himself. Let's see what makes him so strong, he thought, staring at the smiling student as he continued to display a familiar confidence and energy to the rest of the class. All right everyone, line up beside the bus in order of seat number for more efficiency. Began Tenya Iida, who even brought a whistle to call in more attention. Biding his time as 2 hours passed by, Izuku remained seated at the bar, waiting impatiently and with bated breath. Very quickly his suit became uncomfortable to wear as he sat waiting, thinking, hoping. But eventually came an arrival in the form of Kurogiri, who brought a large creature along with him. It was humanoid with dark purple skin, yet it looked beastly and freakish with a bright yellow beak, inhuman eyes and an exposed brain. This new thing that now stood motionless at the bar walked the line between human and completely alien. Even in a world where quirks allowed anyone to look like anything, this creature looked so unnatural and strange that Izuku's uncomfortable feeling grew worse. So this is the Nomu, huh? Asked Tamura, who set down his gaming control and walked over to the new creature with curiosity. He looks tough, no wonder he's supposed to fight All Might. Yet as the teenager walked circles around the Nomu, Izuku was left staring wide-eyed at the demonic creature. That hulking mass was supposed to fight All Might. In knowing just that, Izuku no longer felt safe sitting down as he stood from his seat, keeping it in his line of sight at all times. It will listen to your command alone, Tamura. Try and test it out. Kurogiri encouraged the adolescent. With little hesitation the boy smirked as he started barking commands. Turn around, he said, watching as it mindlessly faced the opposite direction. Walk forward, he ordered, its stomps shaking the wooden floorboards. Yell, he commanded. Soon a distorted screech emanated from the monster as it howled at the roof above, making Tamura smile like a kid with a new toy, or better yet a pet. You needn't be so tense, young Midoriya, it's on our side. Kurogiri advised, noticing the young boy stare at the demonic entity under a teenager's control. I know, but I can't believe it's meant to fight All Might. It looks so inhuman. It's like a monster, the boy explained as he looked at its lifeless eyes. To think that he was staring at a monster that had the same capabilities as All Might, or could at least match them, was mind-blowing. A monster that could take hits that level buildings, shake the earth and even change the weather. And all while walking around like a drone. It was an uncanny sight that made the whole thing that much more horrifying. Of course, but such things must be made to face the enemies we face. Fighting the man who crippled Master is no easy feat in the slightest. Kurogiri rationalized. So it was made. How? An associate of Master made it. A creature enhanced by the power of multiple quirks. He explained. This one in specific was given a number of strength-enhancing quirks and even a shock absorption quirk. Though he can never hit as hard as that man, he can certainly take a blow from him. Wow, I can't believe it, Midoriya gasped. I knew Sensei could have multiple quirks, but to give so many into one. That must be why it doesn't have a mind of its own. Correct, young Midoriya, Kurogiri complimented before asking the most important question he could ever ask. Are you okay with that? Yet again the young boy's mind and spirit were being tested, now strained by the recent revelations. It was one thing to write off hiring killers to do a job, the ends could justify the means in some way or another. But to make a weapon specifically designed to fight the number one hero. To make a weapon so terrifying at all was questionable at best, and yet he himself had to grapple with it. This thing can possibly kill All Might, and anyone else if it's not handled correctly. And knowing Tamura, I doubt that's the case. He thought correctly as he observed the man-child giving the drone a slew of simple yet meaningless commands to satiate his own boredom. But the one thing that kept him from saying anything was his sensei. He was there to hear the full plan and understood that none of these tools can actually kill All Might or any of the students at UA. If anything, heroes should be able to face life or death situations every day, he knew that as well as anybody else. The plan was to scare, not kill. And while he may one day have to take a life, there's the ever-present hope that it will all mean something one day, that he will mean something. Yes, I am. Izuku responded with unease as he continued to stare at the abomination in front of him. Are you certain? Kurogiri reiterated. Yeah, he repeated. I know that no matter what, this I for the better. When we're through, the world will be a better place. Everyone that's ever been in pain can rest easy, where they can fit in. No matter what, I will fight for that future. With that declaration, Kurogiri was able to settle any and all doubts within himself about the boy as he nodded along. Very well, he praised. The mission begins in a few minutes. Prepare yourself, he advised before disappearing yet again. But while Izuku was true to his word, he wasn't fully convinced of his own actions as he continued to eye the monster and its master. As the bus rode toward an unknowing yet ever-present danger, the class remained clueless about what's soon to come. The bus ride itself was rather lively, full of meaningless conversation, comments and peculiar observations from all around. And watching it all was Mirio, who sat directly next to Aizawa as he too observed the teens. So, has All Might finally started your training? The adult asked in a low voice. Actually, this is my training, teaching your class. He responded. Some training, Aizawa commented rather bitterly, though Mirio chose to ignore it. Hey, Mr. Aizawa, Mirio asked suddenly, is it just me or is this the biggest class you've ever had? Not to sound mean or anything, but you don't have a good record of keeping your students. That's because I hold my class to higher standards. He responded, as I'm sure you've realized, being a hero is no laughing matter, and should none of my students realize that, then they don't deserve to be my students. Well, that explains Class 2A. The boy thought, remembering the sophomore class that never was, as the whole class was expelled during the freshman years. So, what type of training are you here for? Aizawa prodded further. Well, I'm supposed to lead your class, but to be honest I'm still not sure how, since you've probably got that covered. The blonde chuckled. Then you're not thinking hard enough, he replied, which came off more like advice than it did a personal insult. You're the top student in the whole school and they know that, and as such you hold power over them. If nothing else, your strength and skill can be a goal to the freshmen. Or a challenge. Really, of course. As the strongest person in the school, people already look up to you whether you like it or not. What you do or say can have an impact on anyone around you too. You can choose to lead by example, or by improving yourself. Or both, Mr. Aizawa told the boy, clearing some much-needed doubt within the boy, as well as setting up some new problems as well. Got it, he thanked, though he seemed a little coy as he asked his question. Do you have any advice for me? To this the teacher could only sigh as he responded. I'm not All Might, nor will I ever be, so I'm not too sure I can give solid advice here. He confessed. But what I can do is give you some suggestions. The tired-looking man pointed at two students, a blonde spiky-haired boy as well as another spiky-haired kid but with red hair. The former seemed upset with his arms crossed and a sneer covering his face while the latter was the exact opposite, content and excited with a big smirk on his face. See those two boys? Yeah, they care a lot about power, too much even. He warned. You'll earn their respect by showing off a thing or two of your own. If they see you as better than them then they're likely to listen. Or strive to be better than you, which is also likely. Next he pointed at two more students, a black-haired boy wearing a full suit of white armor and glasses as well as a girl with long black hair that was kept in a ponytail. Both were studying in their own ways as the boy held a school rule book that was kept in pristine condition while the girl had an equally large book, only it was of chemical compounds and atomic structures. They're the class vice president and president respectively. They're quick studies and very outspoken as well. If you could teach them a thing or two then they'll fall in line like the rest. Finally the teacher pointed at one more student, one that sat alone and at the back of the bus. He had white and red colored hair and was simply staring out a window, lost in thought. And that's Todoroki, as I'm sure you know. He's quiet, but he hides a large ego due to his own quirk. His ice abilities are strong and all, but you of all people can show him that there's more to it than his quirk. As Tagata took mental notes of the students, Mr. Aizawa crossed his hands again, looking away so as to give an air of not caring despite what was being said. The rest are impressionable, but those are the outliers. Handle them with care. If you can take care of them while you teach, then you'll be able to lead this class without much of a problem. Wow, that's super helpful of you. Do you really think of your class this way? Mirio asked curiously. When you've been fighting in the underground for as long as I have, you start to think a certain way. Assessing character is important out there as it is in here. You'll learn to seek out the people who can give you the most trouble that way. The man informed. For a while Mirio processed the new information with great care. Now he had a vague idea of the things he should and shouldn't do around the teens. For someone who claims not to give good advice, he really helped me out here. Soon the bus made a stop as it arrived at its destination, an amazingly large building featuring a dome that spanned many stories high and was thousands of feet in diameter. The purple building featuring the school logo gave off a strong, intimidating aura as it looked exactly as it was meant to be, a test. Standing in front of them was none other than their teacher, the Space Hero 13. The lady wore an extremely large, white windbreaker jacket with a large black helmet that made her reminiscent of an astronaut. The large white gloves in the same design helped pull the outfit together, but strangely enough she also wore shorts of the same make that went below her knees as well as large yellow sneakers. There was just enough to make her stand out as astronaut ESC, yet enough for her to be recognized as more heroine, though the gender was hard to tell without hearing the voice. Hello everyone, Mirio, Aizawa. She greeted the lot. Hi Mrs. 13, thank you for having us. The majority of the class exclaimed as they faced the three mentors for the day. Mirio, I wish you good luck on your training. 13 mentioned under her breath. Teaching kids is hard, especially when they're practically your age. Thanks. Now, if you were to follow the three of us, we'll get started. The woman in costume stated as everyone made their way inside. Quickly yet casually the class with three teachers made its way within the intimidating building to see firsthand the wonders that lay within. The inside of the facility looked hundreds of times larger than the outside, as the opaque windows that comprised the dome allowed just enough light from the sun to brighten the whole building, yet lacked enough to require vastly large lamps to be installed at the perimeter of the building. The inside itself would be best described as a theme park for several natural disasters, all contained in sections that branched off of the central path of the building. Mountains to small industrial buildings to crumbling skyscrapers, all a small variety of the vast options of the facility that was made of loosely strung together environments. These sections were self-contained disasters imitated from real-life events and replicated into events each frozen in time. This is the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, a facility made of natural disasters in the world made to prepare young heroes. 13 addressed the class. Here you all will learn how to apply your quirks practically and in non-lethal scenarios. Because no matter in what field you work in, saving lives is the #1 job of a hero. Be sure to measure yourselves accordingly, Mr. Aizawa continued, Many of you have quirks capable of killing very easily, but that's not why you became heroes. It's to save and protect those that can't help themselves. Mirio added as well, we want to be heroes because there are people who are unable to protect themselves, and because of that we risk our lives to save those who can be saved. It's not about taking down the bad guys or putting criminals to jail, but it's the well-being of the world we live in. As if, Bakugo thought to himself as the teachers finished their speech. That's why we're here, 13 continued, to train you for the future, and to go plus ultra. She exclaimed, making the entire class repeat her words in unison. Just as the chant echoed the length of the building, a strange spark ran through the lights of the building, destroying the lamp lights in a linear path. Huh, didn't know we could do that, Mirio said as everyone witnessed the exploding lights. That's not supposed to happen, 13 responded as the three teachers looked more concerned than ever. But catching their eyes was an enormous black fog that emanated from the center of the facility like a portal to a different realm. Quickly a horde of common criminals and thugs poured out from within the shadow, flooding the center of the facility to the horror of the entire class. They didn't look like they were part of the lesson. Nobody move, Mr. Aizawa ordered as he donned his goggles and surveyed the increasingly dangerous situation. Eventually there came two final figures emerging from the black portal, one a white-haired boy with a severed hand on his face and another a tall black creature that mimicked the physique of All Might. Upon the arrival of the last two people, the portal reshaped itself and shrank vaguely into the form of a bartender with dark purple shadows for bodily features. Everyone run, 13 you and Mirio protect them, Aizawa barked as the class immediately responded, turning around and bolting after the door. But what about you? Mirio asked as Aizawa began sprinting towards the rushing criminals. I'll distract them, you leave. Now, he yelled as he jumped into action, landing directly on top of a thug and using him as a springboard to attack the next two with his scarf. In the distance, the upset Tamura scanned the field for any sight of All Might but found none. He scratched his chin out of annoyance and he stared at the rampaging teacher and the fleeing students. Eraserhead and 13, but no All Might. Not only that, but there's even a third-year student here as well. Kurogiri assessed the situation. This really derails the whole operation. Without All Might, how will we instill fear? Don't worry, I'm sure he'll show up soon enough, Tamura told himself. In the meantime, follow with Phase 2. With a quick nod, the shadow villain disappeared from sight and reappeared as a cloud of mist in front of the students, blocking their entrance. I must introduce us before we begin, he stated, terrifying most of the teenagers below. We are the League of Villains, an organization made to change the world. We've invited ourselves in so that we may kill the symbol of peace, but I see that he isn't here. No matter, you lot will suffice. As if you'll get to lay a finger on us. A blonde figure yelled as he ran up and used the power of 2 explosions to propel himself after the ball of mist. But before the boy could land his attack, a cloud of mist appeared in front of him and teleported him from sight, shocking the rest of the students. Quickly a large dome of purple shadow enveloped the small group, teleporting a number of students all throughout the complex in seemingly random yet calculated positions. However, before the whole group could be teleported by the mist, a powerful vacuum dispersed and absorbed a grand portion of it, destroying the dome and leaving a small handful of students and one teacher with them. That's rather unfortunate. Her ability may very well counter mine if I'm not careful, Kurogiri noted as he stared at the remainder of the class, though upon laying eyes on the teenager with mufflers on his legs, a strangely brilliant idea occurred to him. If I let one of them escape and warn the teachers, All Might will have no choice but to run in and face the Nomu. The mist villain schemed as he blocked the entrance to the building, playing his part as best he could. Further into the massive center of disaster preparation, a small portion of the scattered students appeared in a mountainous region. Todoroki, Yaoyorozu, Asui, Shoji and Mineta all fell from the sky and onto the side of a rocky mountain. Upon their recovery, none of them could tell where they were as they looked around to see a few other disaster zones sectioned separately from the one they were in. What the why are we here? The short purple-haired boy yelled in his panic. Those villains scattered us throughout the compound, replied Yaoyorozu, who immediately took to scanning her surroundings as well as the rest of the students. Quickly Momo and the others realized just what kind of danger they were in as they spotted a number of thugs surrounding them. From their position in the middle of the lifelike mountain there were bandits both above and below them, all searching for any trace of a hero or student. "They're here to kill us," Mineta exclaimed, forcing Asui beside him to cover his mouth. "Hey, I think I heard something over there," a man proclaimed from a distance as the thugs around shifted their gazes in their general direction. "Looks like they know we're here now," Shoji muttered as he prepared for the worst along with the others. But unexpectedly, the ground beneath them froze over as Todoroki used his quirk to cover the ground in ice. Suddenly a large pathway of clear ice formed heading down the mountainside. Without a word the boy slid down the makeshift slide and straight towards a small group of criminals. "Hey there another man yelled before he was suddenly encased in ice along with his friends. Almost immediately afterward every surrounding bandit ran towards the commotion as Todoroki made his way further through the mountain. "Todoroki's attracting all the attention for us," Asui noted as the boy disappeared through the rock and trees. "I think he's trying to give us an opportunity to escape," Shoji commented as well. But behind them, Mineta hyperventilated in his panic. For his first villain encounter this was more than a little extreme. Surrounded by people out to kill them and separated from the rest of their group. The four of them felt the same way, though only Mineta was the one to crack under the pressure. "We're gonna die. Those villains are here to kill us," he repeated to himself as he paced back and forth, somewhat unaware of his surroundings. Without hesitation Suyu moved in to slap the boy clean across his cheek, shifting his attention to her. "Stop panicking. How?" he pleaded. "We're trapped here with no adults to help us. Those villains said that they were here to kill All Might, but he's not here." And Todoroki just ran off. After he had said his piece he was slapped once again, preventing him from yelling any louder than he was already. "Please stop it. We might be in danger, but if we stay on our feet then maybe we can get out of here and escape," Momo stated, displaying a much-needed confidence and self-assurance. "What about the others?" Shoji asked. "Without knowing where they are it'd be impossible to help them without putting ourselves into greater risk. For now we have to escape and hope that they can handle themselves." "Well, with people like Bakugo I'm sure they can escape as well," Suyu added. "Are you sure? Those are hardened killers we're fighting. And we're just high schoolers." Mineta panicked. "Listen, I need you to calm down," Momo ordered as she kneeled before him, meeting him at eye level. "We all need to do our part here to survive, and it starts with you getting serious, okay? Can you do that?" Without a word the nervous boy gave her a slow nod as she continued. "Good. But please, I need to know that you won't run away when we start fighting because we need to stick together to ensure our own safety." There was a hesitation as the frightened teen continued to stare into the eyes of the pretty girl. Part of him feared what was to come. He wanted to run away as fast as he could and save himself from the perilous situation. But the other part knew that he couldn't let her down, to let anyone down. These people were counting on him to move forward, looking at him seriously for the first time ever. If not for his own safety then it was definitely the faint promise of having both Asui and Yaoyorozu hug him tightly against their chests after everything that motivated him to stay strong. "I won't run away, I'll fight," he exclaimed, fully changing his perspective at the thought of being so close to a girl. As he stood tall and firm a small blush came to his face as he stared back at Momo. "You're thinking of something perverted again, aren't you?" Asui commented. "Yes I am," the boy replied with absolutely no shame in his voice. "That doesn't matter right now," Momo sighed as she stood back up. "What does matter is that we focus on the situation on hand." "What about Todoroki? I can hear that he's still fighting a group of villains down below," Shoji interjected. "Then we follow him. Even if he's the strongest in our class we can't leave him alone." "Then let's go," Mineta yelled as he bolted towards the slide from earlier and disappeared after Todoroki. "He really flipped a switch after your talk, Yaoyorozu," Asui stated, surprised at the enthusiasm he displayed after the fear he showed. "Maybe it's cause he was standing so close to a girl," Shoji commented, making Momo sigh deeply. "Please, let's focus." Further ahead of them the son of Endeavor forced his path through the large mountain, encasing anyone he encountered with ice before they could react. So far it's been working wonderfully as he's made it near the bottom of the mountain. "These villains aren't that tough at all," Even with my powers, it doesn't take much to knock them out," he thought as he slid down an ice path. Although it was surprising to be surrounded by so many criminals, it didn't take long for him to realize that none of them had what it takes to defeat him. If he had to guess, they were all street thugs who happened to be dragged along by the League of Villains, unless the League was made of hundreds of weak villains. Still, there was something off about the whole situation that made him think as he escaped. Those lights are still out from earlier, and no one could have entered without triggering some sort of alarm, even through teleporting, he thought, leading him to a working theory. These people planned this carefully, making sure that we were scattered so that they could pick us off, or distract us. How these villains planned on killing All Might was beyond him, but what he did know was that with All Might gone, their chances of survival were reduced. With a villain that could teleport using his quirk, it was safe to say that none of them were safe so long as they remained here, and maybe even then. But as Todoroki made his way down the mountain, the sudden shaking of the ground forced him to stop and take cover behind a tree. He didn't know why, but for some reason that light tremor did not feel natural. Slowly the minor thumping of the ground grew closer and closer until the boy could finally recognize that what he felt were actually heavy stomps on the ground. Appearing a short distance away came a creature similar in design to the one from earlier, the one that stood beside the man with white hair. It was just as tall and almost as buff, but it had white skin instead of purple and with a mangled face instead of a sharp yellow beak. It was an imposing figure that looked quite strong on its own. If anything, that creature that was different from the street thugs was likely one of the aces in the villain's sleeves. If that thing can kill All Might, then I have to be careful, he thought as he prepared for a sneak attack. The creature stomped forward almost unaware of its surroundings, mindlessly striding after an unknown goal. But when once it neared Todoroki's position, it stopped as it took notice of the long ice slide behind him. Left with no other choice, the boy jumped out of cover and flung his right hand forward, sending a wave of ice to instantly cover the field in front of him. Almost immediately the field before him was enveloped in ice as thick as rock. But surprisingly, the ice that covered the creature began to crack until the creature flexed its muscles while inside a block of ice, destroying it and setting him free. What? It's resistant to ice, Shoto asked himself as he ran towards a tree for cover. But soon the monster reacted as it roared at the distant ceiling above before grabbing a shard of ice beside it and tossing it like a javelin after the team. Quickly he reacted by taking a step out and watching as the sharp spear of ice pierced the tree and occupied the space he once took. Did they prepare for me too? He asked himself, shocked as he saw the creature stride forward, finding himself a target to attack. Of the few students that were saved from being separated, there only remained 4, Uraraka, Iida, Ashido and Jiro. These 4 of 20 were aghast by what they witnessed as they all feared that the worst had happened. Still, the most obvious problem in front of them kept them focused as much as they were afraid. Stay behind me, kids, I'll make sure he doesn't teleport us. 13 reassured her students as they all huddled behind her in search of a plan of action. How annoying, a barrier preventing my quirk. Still, I won't let you leave so easily, the shadow villain said as it floated in a misty form in front of them, waiting for further action. What do we do? Thought Ochako, who trembled as she stared at the scary figure in front of them. To think that they'd encounter such hard-boiled villains so early in their lives, it scared her to think that normal heroes would fight people like them. Do you have a plan of action, Miss 13? Iida questioned. I'm thinking of one, she replied, trying to keep her cool. As the tense air seemed to freeze everyone in place, a portal appeared from behind the students, attempting to absorb the students once again. But the second it appeared, the space hero turned and absorbed the evil cloud, rendering it useless. Annoying indeed, Kurogiri repeated. Is there any way that we can attack him? Ochako thought long and hard as the stalemate continued. Thoughts flooded her head as her body prevented her from moving even an inch away from the safety of 13's protection. She worried herself to death over the safety of everyone that was teleported away, and even wondered if everyone would come out alive or not. These new and horrific concerns kept her body frozen in place, unable to act. Let's try this again then. The shadow spoke as another portal appeared beside them. Quickly the teacher turned to deal with the problem, but unexpectedly the portal was fed more and more energy as it refused to disappear from sight. Instead, just behind the hero appeared a second portal growing larger and larger until 13 was flanked from both ends by 2 portals. 13, look out! Mina yelled as she realized something that the others didn't. Suddenly the portal behind 13 began pulling her inwards, ripping the air around her with the same force that she used to absorb the portal in front of her. Upon seeing this, everyone realized what was happening. The portal in front of 13 absorbed the pull of the black hole and transmitted the pull to the one behind her, creating a vacuuming loop. But the realization came too late as 13 yelled in pain. Everyone watched as the back half of her suit began to rip and tear. Even after the teacher was able to catch on and turn off her quirk, the damage was already done. The back of her suit tore clean off and exposed an inky darkness that seemed to seep out of the suit little by little. What the? She's fine, Ochako stated as she ran to the side of the fallen hero. She took a moment to place her hand inside of the suit and discovered that although it appeared like there was nothing inside, there was indeed a body beneath the suit. And thus the impediment falls, Kurogiri declared. Without any other choice, the 4 students stood and faced the villain, legs still shaking and hearts still racing. Even if they couldn't, their lives depended on a possible plan of attack, a coordinated strike. Within one of many sections of the disastrous scenery, there were a few city blocks replicated into the worst versions of themselves. Buildings that crumbled and fell apart after an imaginary event took place in order to give off the aura of a ruined and abandoned city. Broken glass and loose concrete scattered over the roads and sidewalks, and amongst it all was Izuku Midoriya, wondering just where he was. The boy understood that he was in the USJ, if the sky made of opaque glass had anything to do with it, but just where he was is what confused him. After he stepped into the portal just beside Tamura, he was transported to this landscape with none of his allies in sight. For a little while Midoriya calmed his nerves by walking around the area. Eventually, after realizing that he was going to be at the forefront of the operation, Midoriya began to question everything. Where were the street criminals that were supposed to support him? Where were the students? What was he supposed to do when he meets them? Where's Bakugo? He asked himself, feeling his nervousness rise as he thought of the ruthless boy. After having acquired a quirk and having trained his body for months, he still didn't know if he had a chance at beating his old friend. The fear that the blonde teen was able to inflict upon him at a very young age was something that he could never forget, and while it did influence his vision of him, the question also remained on his abilities. With a quirk as strong as his and an even sharper mind, he didn't know if things would be close. Maybe he could tire him out. No, then he'd have more sweat to attack him with. Maybe he could hit him hard enough. No, his quirk made movement easy and effortless. And since he was the top student at the UA entrance exams, he doubted he didn't know any of this. As he leaned against a wall with a minor headache, his hand rested just above his hip, on the knife that he kept holstered with him. Glancing at the knife, an idea came to him, but was scrubbed from his mind just as quickly. No, I don't want to kill him either. I don't want to kill anyone, he thought. Walking into the second story of a building, Izuku looked out the window to see the lonely emptiness before him. For a moment he was scared to see the utter ruin that the fake city was in, as though a great war passed and destroyed any semblance of normality there was before it. The strong sense of abandonment and collapse horrified the boy as he shook his head for better focus. Hopefully this never happens again. Not if I have anything to say about it, he thought to himself, fearful of what may one day come in his line of villainy. But pulling him from his thoughts was something that occurred past the broken window pane he was looking through. A familiar cloud of black mist appeared and out came a few teens. One had spiky red hair, another with messy yellow hair, and the third had short black hair. These 3 were definitely heroes in training, each wearing a hero costume yet being too young to be heroes. But the 4th and final student was all too recognizable with his spiky blonde hair and enraged expression in his face. Damn it, he separated us, Bakugo yelled as he slammed a fist into the ground. Calm down, Bakugo, said the boy with red hair, we're still in the simulation joint. You'd think that the alarms would have sounded by now or something, said another. That's cause they shut down the alarm system, dumbass. You can tell by the way the lights went out. Bakugo lectured as though it was the most obvious observation one could make. Maybe I could contact someone with my quirk. Unless they're jamming radio signals too. said the boy with yellow hair as he began to mess with his large white earpiece. I'm guessing Sensei never had to tell us about that. If radio's jammed then our phones are too. No use in calling the police or even the teachers then. Then we really are on our own here. I don't think so, Bakugo replied as he looked around his surroundings, and in that instance of surprise his eyes met Izuku's as he peeked from the window. Crap, he thought, ducking back into cover. Panic overtook him as he thought about a new strategy. He was supposed to distract them long enough for the fight with All Might and the Nomu to conclude, but with his cover blown he had no idea what to do next. Maybe I have to fight them. Fight him, he realized as he peeked over the glass once more. But to his shock he could not spot Bakugo in the distance. Instead Midoriya caught the very moment that the teenage grenade flew at him, soaring through the air at full speed and outstretching both arms to charge a more powerful blast like he was holding a ball. Die. At the center of the conflict and of the entire facility was a small army of low-level thugs and criminals. Fighting these sizable group of villains was the underground hero Eraserhead, who was able to maneuver through the crowd and take out the villains one by one. For a moment he sidestepped an incoming punch before flipping to his side and landing an elbow to the chin of his tall and muscular assailant, following with a spin kick to the side of the head. His eyes glowing a bright red and his hair floating slightly he used his scarf to grapple onto the man and mount him, riding on top of his back like a horse. Quickly he attempted to use his fists to knock him out, but quickly the large man grabbed him and tossed him away like a toy. Although he landed on his feet he was still at a disadvantage as the hulking figure charged towards him. Damn it, removing his quirk doesn't change his durability, Aizawa thought as he quickly raised his arms in preparation for a counter. Suddenly a zooming figure came straight from the floor, shooting off at the speed of a bullet and ramming into the tall man's chin. Almost immediately the man fell to the floor unconscious as the figure fell back onto the group light on its feet. Glad I was able to make an entrance, said Mirio Tagata as his cape fluttered behind him, sending chills down the spines of every criminal around. Mirio, what are you doing here? The teacher questioned as the two stood back to back, waiting for anyone to make the next move. I was with the class when we got separated by that black mist, he explained with raised fists. I was able to avoid it using my quirk but doing so landed me with you. Then get back to the students and make sure they escape, he ordered. No can do. Why not? Because I can't leave anyone behind, especially not when you're fighting against something that could kill All Might, said the teenager with a smile on his face. With a sigh and a nod Aizawa accepted his new circumstances, knowing he didn't have the power to refuse. Then be careful, I might erase your quirk on accident while we fight. No problem, it's more than my quirk that makes me strong. As the two finished their conversation the thugs finally mustered up the courage to charge after the two heroes, forcing them to move out and attack. And all the while two murderous eyes were dead set on the new arrival. He's just like All Might, Tamura thought with a rising hatred filling his veins. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.